Chapter 61. The Great Mr. Jack. The chaos at the zoo and the deadly trap set for the Pompey family today were mostly inseparable from him, and Chen Lun was ready to capture this ringleader for a thorough interrogation. "Mommy!" In the middle of the street, a little girl cried out, pushing the unconscious woman lying on the ground. Two elephants trumpeted and flung aside everything in their path with their thick trunks. The mother and daughter had been knocked down by the crowd during the turmoil at the zoo, and in trying to protect her daughter, the mother had unfortunately hit her head and fallen into a coma. Roar! In the midst of the thunderous vibration, an elephant had already approached, casting a massive shadow over the little girl. Those at the back of the pack looked back to see the scene and their hearts skipped a beat. They didn't have the courage to go back and save the girl, so with clenched teeth and faces showing compassion, they turned and fled. The elephant lifted its foot, and in the next second, it would stomp the mother and daughter into a pulp. Boom! A tall figure appeared out of nowhere, leaning an elbow against the side of the elephant. The tremendous impact made the elephant stagger, and the earth trembled beneath it. Rhinoceros impact! The little girl's eyes widened as she looked at the figure standing in front of her and her mother, her thoughts coming to a halt. Her face was still streaked with tears, and she wore a blank expression. The next second, she felt herself lifted into the air, cradled in someone's arms. "Take care of your mom and don't let the monsters take her away, okay?" The girl heard a man's voice and felt a large hand stroke her head, then she soon realized that she and her mother were inside a small shop, beside several young tourists hiding under the counter, who gave her awkward smiles. Chen Lun returned to the center of the street, blocking the way for the two elephants. Seeing the little guy who had knocked into it, the elephant was particularly enraged and swung its long trunk forward. Bear strike! The white exoskeleton on Chen Lun's elbow vanished, his fingers spread, and a pad appeared in his palm, slapping the elephant's trunk away. Roar! The long trunk swung wildly in the air like a swing broken by a capricious child. Seeing its companion at a loss, the other elephant charged over to relieve it. Chen Lun leaped on the spot, nimbly flipping onto the elephant's back and grabbing its ears, then slapped its forehead with his palm. Bear strikes again. Boom! The elephant's vision shook immediately, dizzy and disoriented, its front legs collapsing unwillingly onto its knees. Roar! Chen Lun tugged at its ears and made trumpeting sounds close to its ear, trying to communicate with it. These two elephants aren't influenced by supernatural powers, so you could try to convince them. The task specified tame rather than kill, and Chen Lun had also noticed they were merely provoked by humans. He believed that with his professional expertise and high charm attributes, he could complete the physical persuasion. After several minutes of communication, the anger of the two elephants subsided, and they regained their calm. A big part of the reason was that they couldn't beat him. In their feeling of fear and awe, they chose to submit. You have successfully tamed the furious elephants, completing the D-level task, Beast Tamer's Entrance. Received task rewards, 800 experience points, 70 silver ducats and low sequence destiny faction mysterious substance 1. Chen Lun didn't pay attention to the prompt for the time being, and had the two elephants stay put. He then headed towards the location where Baron Barney had previously disappeared. What he didn't notice was that in the small shop where the little girl was, among the group of young tourists, a man excitedly picked up the camera on his chest and pressed the shutter several times at his retreating figure. Oh my god! By the sun! He actually subdued two furious elephants all by himself. Chen Lun searched the men's restroom but found no trace of Baron Barney. He went outside and flicked out his tongue to collect Barney's pheromones, but to no avail. This guy is very cunning, he never came here. He probably left straight away. Thinking about it was normal. If he really was the mastermind, he wouldn't stay at the scene to secretly observe unless he was extremely twisted. Chen Lun set this matter aside for the time being and kept it in mind. 10 minutes later, Viscount Pompey's family, anxiously waiting outside the zoo's great gate, saw a tall figure approaching from afar. They hurried forward to meet him. "Mr. Jack, are you all right?" the Viscount asked. "I'm fine, but I haven't found Baron Barney either." Chen Lun shook his head. A hint of regret appeared on Viscount Pompey's face. "May the sun bless him, I hope Barney can take care of himself." After a prayer, the Viscount turned to Chen Lun again, looking serious. "Mr. Jack, thank you so much for your actions just now. You are truly a great and noble person. If it weren't for you distracting that tiger, I'm afraid Binos and we." Chen Lun feigned a look of lingering fear and gently waved his hand. "Actually, I just acted instinctively at the time, subconsciously believing that my deep research in animals would allow me to control the situation. Fortunately, it tripped over itself, otherwise the consequences would have been unimaginable. In any case, we are very grateful to you, Mr. Jack. Viscount Pompey sincerely thanked Chen Lun, and both Lady Pompey and Binos also gave him grateful looks. Especially Rebecca, her eyes brimming with almost overflowing admiration. At the Pompey Manor dinner table, the Viscount took out 50 gold pounds as a token of appreciation, but Chen Lun declined graciously. He joked that he simply wished to take a few books from the study, as knowledge was priceless. The Pompey family was greatly surprised. They hadn't expected anyone to be so indifferent to fame and wealth, solely pursuing knowledge, which commanded their heightened respect. Chen Lun's image once again surged in their minds, becoming that of a scholar both profoundly knowledgeable and bravely fearless. Viscount Pompey declared on the spot that the money must be accepted, and that books from the study were his to take as he wished. Chen Lun gratefully accepted with dignified righteousness. Pfft! On the way home, he couldn't help but snicker quietly to himself. 50 gold pounds in the bag, and in the study, apart from that yellow-covered book he hadn't finished, he wondered if there was any other supernatural knowledge. This was like Emperor Qin Shi Huang getting a shock from touching an electric wire, a total win. Suddenly, his expression changed slightly. Stop the carriage! Clattering. The coachman pulled the carriage over to the side of the road. Chen Lun lifted the curtain and stepped down while the coachman looked at him with a puzzled face. Sir! Stay here and don't move, wait for my return. Chen Lun surveyed his surroundings and then dashed off in one direction with a stern face. During the day at the zoo, he had improved his insight by 4 points using survival of the fittest and had suddenly felt a whiff of danger while he was in the carriage just now. His sixth sense told him that someone was watching him. Who could it be? Chen Lun flitted under lampless shade, moving only within the shadows each time. The sense of imminent danger was not strong, but it was there, faint yet perceptible, like being targeted by a gun. Bang! A gunshot pierced the quiet night. Chapter 62. The bullet hit the trunk of the tree, splintering wood chips. In his line of sight, the tall figure disappeared into the shadows. Damn it! Hiding behind a building, the assassin cursed. In a nearby corner, another masked man urged. Hurry up and find him. Finish the job within 30 seconds, the patrolling guards will be here any minute. Got it. The assassin replied impatiently, about to change positions when a large hand suddenly grabbed his protruding head. Crack! The strength in the hand was immense, and the man realized he couldn't break free. Looking up, he saw the unexpressive face of his assassination target. The other man's face was hidden in backlight, leaving only a pair of cold vertical pupils. The assassin made a snap decision, withdrawing the short dagger from his waist and stabbing towards Chen Lun's abdomen. Clang! The expected sensation of the blade piercing flesh didn't come, and the assassin's face turned pale. The sharp dagger seemed to have struck steel, ringing out clearly. That fleeting dark golden sheen was the last color in his vision. Chen Lun shoved the hand holding the assassin's head, then pulled back, his 5 fingers snapping together at the man's throat. Blood-stained fingers wiped across the assassin's collar, and he turned to walk away. Thud! The assassin had just collapsed to the ground, clutching his neck. You have killed a member of the Black Knife Brotherhood, gaining 50 experience points. The Black Knife Brotherhood. Who's put a price on my head? Chen Lun sneered. The Black Knife Brotherhood was a notorious assassin organization, similar to the Silver Dragon Trade Association, but all their business involved human lives. Chen Lun had reached the end of the alley. On either side were narrow passageways leading to different streets, but he saw no other suspicious figures. Got away? Lucky you. Chen Lun muttered to himself. He straightened his top hat and turned to leave. As his footsteps faded into the distance, a black-clothed assassin perched atop the wall let out a sigh of relief. He leaped from the wall, rolling on the ground to break his fall. As he raised his head, preparing to retreat, his hair stood on end, he heard a voice by his ear. Quite the somersault. Turning his head stiffly, he saw his intended victim quietly standing by his side, smiling at him. Death! The assassin reached for his gun to shoot, but felt a sharp pain in his wrist. Chen Lun kicked his hand, breaking it as it reached inside his coat. He then grabbed the assassin by the neck, lifting him as if he were a little chicken. Who wants my life? A dim glow emanated from the mermaid's song on his chest, trying to hypnotize the assassin. Unexpectedly, the assassin's body stiffened, and he began bleeding black blood from all orifices, dying on the spot. The conspiracy faction's contract. I should have known. Chen Lun casually tossed the corpse to the ground, and scowled in frustration. Trigger C-level mission, Clouds of Conspiracy. Mission description: it seems you've been drawn into a plot. Someone is targeting Viscount Pompey with a series of murder schemes, and you've inadvertently touched someone's interests. Find out the mastermind behind the scenes. Snuff out the conspiracy and schemes. Mission rewards: 1500 experience points, 2 gold pounds, Pompey's affection, and a copy of Low Sequence Flesh Faction Mystic Book 1. Find nothing. Chen Lun accepted the mission but had no intention of searching for any mastermind. Although he coveted the Flesh Faction sequence pathway listed in the task reward, Chen Lun had more important matters to attend to and neither had the time nor the inclination to bother with it. Since the task didn't set a time limit, he decided to put it aside for now. The most likely condition for failure would be the death of Viscount Pompey, but as Chen Lun spent most of his days in the manor, he was ready to kill anyone who dared to come after him. Images of Baron Barney flashed through his mind, and the situation mostly likely had something to do with this man. Bring it on, I was worried I wouldn't be able to catch you. The next day, Chen Lun arrived early at Pompey Manor. While Rebecca was still resting, he sneaked into the study to read. The yellow-covered book containing Nature Faction supernatural knowledge was thin, and Chen Lun took 2 hours to finish reading it. By carefully reading, you have gained 450 experience points. Nature Faction Mystic Book on Survival Instinct, Progress 100%, has been completely read. You've additionally gained 1 skill point and 1 attribute point. Not bad at all. Chen Lun gave himself a thumbs up and then pocketed the yellow-covered book, planning to take it home after work. Just as he was about to search the study for the next treasure, his interest was interrupted. It was his old friend Binos, who knocked on the door and tactfully reminded him that it was time to go down for lunch. Today's lessons were scheduled in the afternoon, and it was already the time for lunch. During the luncheon, Chen Lun chatted with the Viscount about the Pompey family, indirectly inquiring for some information. Originally, he just wanted to know about some past history, but inadvertently, he learned that Viscount Pompey had an adopted son. Vigri is the son of my comrade in arms. That overseas landing battle was extremely brutal, and my comrade rests forever on that island. His wife remarried afterwards, leaving only Vigri behind, so I adopted him. Viscount Pompey looked melancholic, sipping his drink and reflecting. Vigri is just like his father, wholeheartedly dedicated to the empire, and still actively engaged in military service abroad, seldom returning home. During this, he had butler Binos bring over an album to show Chen Lun a photo. It was a young man with brown short hair, in military dress, and not given to smiling. Chen Lun found him somewhat familiar but couldn't remember where he had seen him before. After the luncheon, Rebecca rolled over excitedly with a newspaper in hand. The wheelchair made a rumbling noise on the floor, scaring Binos, who was ready to come to the rescue at any moment. Mr. Jack! You made the headlines. Chen Lun took the newspaper from her, and following Rebecca's guidance, he found himself featured in a large section. Uproar at the Emerald Scream Zoo. Tiger unleashed. Elephant kills. Mysterious young man casts magic to subdue the beasts. Controls the ferocious animals. After reading the title, he saw a photo of himself standing next to 2 elephants, revealing only a blurry profile. Chen Lun frowned. The news report was quite detailed, as if it had witnessed the entire process in person. Moreover, it was highly exaggerated, speculating conspiratorially about Chen Lun's identity and magic. The article failed to mention the injured crowd but instead fabricated a 2-digit death toll, implying the suspicion towards his magic. Although not stated outright, there was an insinuation that he caused the tragedy. The Cypress Leaves Post always comes up with such sensationalist stories, if not tabloids then rumors. Butler Binos, who had finished reading along, sarcastically expressed his opinion. As if he had thought of something, Viscount Pompey came over and whispered to Chen Lun. This newspaper, just like the zoo, is owned by Earl Bradley. The negative impact of the zoo incident is too great, they probably want to find someone to shift the attention. You may be approached by a special department in the coming days, Mr. Jack. He patted Chen Lun's shoulder. But don't worry, I'll handle them for you. However, it would be best for you to stay in the manor for the time being. I'm concerned they might use some methods against you. Chapter 63. Room on the third floor. Chen Lun sat by the window, looking down at his own arm. Gurgling. Beneath the skin covered in dark golden scales, his muscles slowly writhed, his entire arm snaking around. The serpent's head rose, revealing two fangs glowing with a faint green luster. Those were two of Chen Lun's fingers. The serpentine incarnation, snake's kiss, and carp armor. Is it already the limit to exert three attributes at the same time? This is still because they are relatively compatible with each other, otherwise such an effect would not be achieved. Chen Lun dispelled the changes on his arm and began to think and analyze. Since becoming a transcendent, he hadn't systematically planned his power system. After his trip to the zoo, he had gained quite a few new attributes. After sorting and picking, the 10 memory slots left by animal mimicry contained only those he felt were of special value. He intended to make sensible arrangements for himself, allowing his powers to be utilized to a more perfect effect. Molting, serpent senses, scorpion tail needle, stork stomach, stork peck, rhinoceros impact, and bear strike, plus the previous 3 made a total of 10. The former ultrasonic wave he had also eliminated, as its slight controlling effect overlapped with the hypnosis necklace, and was even far inferior. It's a pity that even after obtaining flying attributes, I still can't fly at all. Chen Lun sighed inwardly. This was the limitation of Sequence 9, something he couldn't change through human effort. Perhaps after he advanced to Sequence 8, he could try again. An ascension in Sequence not only brings new transcendent powers but can also cover the prior Sequence abilities and lift their upper limits. I'll try then to integrate the 10 attributes into one, which will most likely produce a qualitative change. Chen Lun felt that it was feasible and was filled with anticipation. He then looked at the equipment laid out on the table, the 3 mysterious objects he currently possessed: a necklace, a hand crossbow, and a badge. Ignoring the word damaged, neatly one each from B, C, and D. With the 16 attribute points stored in the panel, I'm about as close as I can be to the limit of Sequence 9, and against a transcendent of 1 sequence higher than me, it's not impossible to put up a fight. Chen Lun rested his chin on his hand and mused, wearing the Dragon King's characteristic Nike smile. Underestimating me would be a lese majesty, and I'd flip them on the spot. Mr. Jack, it's time to eat. Connie's call came from outside the room, and Chen Lun switched his face like a Sichuan opera performer, reverting to normal. Wait a moment, I'll be right there. He packed up the items on the table and got up to leave. Floey, as usual, had cooked a hearty lunch, not only delicious but also filling, generous in portion. But Chen Lun was no longer a simpleton, with stork stomach and surging badge doubling up, he ate all that came without refusal, leaving nothing behind. Fortunately, there was no fish, which he disliked, making the meal exceptionally comfortable. Lately, Connie hadn't been going to school, busying herself in the manor's warehouse, her appetite quite large as well. The two of them cleared the food on the table, and Floey nodded repeatedly, a look of satisfaction and contentment on her face. Chen Lun was thinking of ways to help Connie get in touch with the Iris Academy, planning to send her there for further study. It would be a good time to find Mrs. Ulysses, a professor there. The mermaid's song hypnosis must have worn off by now, but subconsciously, there should still be an impression and fondness for Chen Lun, only needing another round of hypnosis when the time comes. By the way, Floey, I'll be moving to Pompey Manor for a while tomorrow. After lunch, Chen Lun said as he sipped tea. Although he was not afraid of the so-called special department investigations, since Viscount Pompey had invited him, he was naturally willing to stay at the manor for a while, which was also more conducive to his search for Philip's legacy. Floey was slightly taken aback, while Connie's face showed a curious and gossipy look. Mr. Jack, that Viscount's manor must be very large, right? And since you're employed as that Viscount's daughter's tutor, could there be any sparks of love? After saying this, Connie immediately realized she sounded like one of those gossiping ladies from the outer city district, not very ladylike at all. Ah! No, I didn't mean that. Her face turned red as she embarrassingly muttered about boiling a kettle of water, then got up and slipped away. Floey silently cleaned up the dinner plates, and after a while, a ethereal voice softly said, "Can I move over and live with you? Connie is busy every day, and I'm a bit bored alone." Chen Lun thought for a moment. In a couple of days, when Connie went to the academy, leaving Floey alone here would indeed be dangerous. Someone had secretly commissioned an assassin from the Black Knife Brotherhood, and it was uncertain whether they would find his small manor. Of course, you can. Then come with me tomorrow. He nodded and said. A smile appeared on Floey's face. In a corner of the inner city district, there was an art studio. The great gate was pushed open, and Baron Barney strode in with a grim face. The empty studio held only a young man, who was back to him and immersed in painting. The walls were covered with bizarre oil paintings, and the area around was scattered with paints and canvases, chaotic with an artistic atmosphere. But Baron Barney clearly had no interest in appreciating the art. He walked up behind the young man and said in a deep voice. Vickery, something's gone wrong. The Pompey family didn't die. The young man's painting brush paused, then he continued painting without interruption. Baron Barney furrowed his eyebrows and took a deep breath. I need your help now, Vickery. A transcendent has come to the Pompeys, and he's after me. I have to hide and can't show up for the time being. The young man set down his paintbrush and sighed. How many times have I told you not to call me by that name? He slowly turned around, looking at Baron Barney expressionlessly. His brown curly hair fell over his forehead, revealing a pair of indifferent eyes. All right. Mr. Dolly, can you help me now? Baron Barney made a helpless gesture and leaned in to ask. The young man turned back to his easel, picked up the paintbrush, and outlined a golden-haired girl on the canvas. No. Veins popped on Baron Barney's forehead. Dolly, this is a task assigned to us by the oil paint baron. If you stand by, we will both suffer when the time comes. I know, but don't trouble me because of your incompetence. The young man pondered for a moment, seemingly contemplating over his painting. He dabbed some blue paint and added radiance to the golden-haired girl's eyes, ultimately giving her the appearance of Rebecca. I have more important things to finish. What things? Baron Barney knitted his brows, feeling irritable. None of your concern. Dolly. The young man ripped the canvas off the easel, and Rebecca was severed in two. He got up, shaking his head. This is terrible, absolutely terrible, not even 1% as good as the oil paint baron. Do you think I lack talent in painting, Barney? Looking at the young man talking to himself, Baron Barney took a deep breath and asked in a serious tone. How much time do you need? Give me another week. Once I'm done with my business, I'll come to assist you. Fine. Chapter 64. Chen Lun brought a few sets of clothes to change into, and together with Floey, they took a carriage to Pompey Manor. He greeted the Viscount and explained that his blind sister had no one to look after her at home, requesting to stay at the manor together. As Chen Lun expected, Viscount Pompey was surprised but immediately nodded in agreement. Mr. Jack, so you have a sister that needs care. If I may be so bold, I have yet to meet anyone in the inner city district who surpasses you in character and morality. Viscount Pompey praised. Then he called for butler Binos, instructing him to arrange accommodations for Chen Lun and Floey. Since Mr. Jack is willing to trust me, please feel at ease living in the manor and treat this place as your own home. Chen Lun took off his hat and bowed with his hand on his chest. Thank you, Viscount Pompey. Floey stood by his side, quiet as a beautiful doll that could not speak, and followed Chen Lun in bending the knee to the Viscount. Binos led Chen Lun and Floey to the backyard, where there were several unoccupied villas. Chen Lun had no particular requirements for his surroundings, after all, he was only staying temporarily for a couple of days to search for Philip's legacy more conveniently. However, the environment of Pompey Manor was very good, arguably the best in the inner city district. In the backyard, there were several large trees with robust growth, with one tree even featuring a swing hanging from its branches, decorated with woven flowers on its ropes. Seeing it, Chen Lun thought of Rebecca, perhaps she used to play here as a child. Here we are, Mr. Jack. You and Miss Floey may select any room you like here, each has an ensuite bathroom. If you need anything, you can call for the maids or come find me, Binos said. He bowed slightly, then withdrew. Chen Lun and Floey had just put down their luggage and had not yet started to unpack when they heard shouting from downstairs. Mr. Jack. Chen Lun went downstairs and saw Rebecca sitting in a wheelchair, her face flushed as she looked up at him. I heard from father you moved in. She stopped midway when she saw the young girl who came with Chen Lun, and her expression changed slightly. Is this your wife? Rebecca asked cautiously. Chen Lun couldn't help but smile, and Floey spoke from his side. I'm his sister, Floey. Ah. So you are Miss Floey. Nice to meet you, I am Mr. Jack's student, you can call me Rebecca. Rebecca said, with a hint of joy in her eyes. So it's just his sister. I still have a chance. Rebecca breathed a sigh of relief and smiled as she reached out her hand to Floey. Miss Floey, you are very beautiful, no wonder you are Mr. Jack's sister. After she finished complimenting, Rebecca noticed the black silk covering Floey's eyes and realized that she was blind, which made Rebecca awkwardly think of retracting her hand. But to her surprise, Floey gently took her hand. You are very beautiful too, Miss Rebecca. Rebecca's expression turned strange. Floey's voice was truly pleasant to hear, but since she was clearly blind, was she flattering her by saying she was pretty? However, Rebecca couldn't say those words out loud, it would be too impolite. Thank you for your compliment, Miss Floey. After exchanging a few more words, Rebecca suddenly remembered something and looked apologetically at Chen Lun. Did I disturb you, Mr. Jack? You haven't even unpacked your luggage, have you? It's okay, it's just 2 sets of clothes. Chen Lun said. He sensed something and glanced past Rebecca towards the door, seeing a flash of green. I plan to go out and take a walk in the backyard, Miss Rebecca. Chen Lun said apologetically. Ah. Please feel free, Mr. Jack. Rebecca immediately turned her head to look at Floey. I think we have a lot to talk about, Miss Floey, can I befriend you? Of course, Miss Rebecca. Floey said. Rebecca looked pleased, carefully taking Floey's hand, which stiffened slightly but did not pull away. Mr. Jack, I would like to chat with Miss Floey here for a while, is that okay? Chen Lun glanced at Floey, saw her keeping a smile without resistance, and then nodded his head and walked towards the door. After Chen Lun's figure disappeared at the doorway, Rebecca silently sized up Floey. She had to admit that the other's appearance and temperament were fantastic, surpassing her own in certain respects. Rebecca suppressed the slight envy and jealousy rising in her heart and asked softly. Miss Floey, do you know what kind of food Mr. Jack usually likes? Floey smiled, her ethereal voice softly saying. Fish. Hiss hiss. A small emerald green poisonous snake flicked its tongue, crawling onto Chen Lun's hand. He casually sat on a swing, receiving the information it had gathered these past few days. A moment later, Chen Lun frowned, looking at the little snake on his hand. Are you sure? The snake looked up at Chen Lun, silently flicking its tongue. After a long silence, Chen Lun's heart sank. According to the information conveyed by the snake, it had thoroughly scouted the backyard of Pompey Manor, but found no trace of any underground space. Could there be an oversight? Chen Lun thought to himself. He did not want to miss this opportunity because he very much needed it at this stage. From the descriptions in Philip's diary, it can be roughly inferred that Philip had likely transcended the low sequence before his death. Because his opponent was very likely a mid-sequence transcendent from the Earth faction, and facing such an enemy, Philip must have been at least a sequence 7 presence. After all, the disparity between low sequence and mid-sequence in terms of strength is vast. Without a qualitative leap, Philip could not have lasted that long. Therefore, Philip's legacy is extremely valuable, equivalent to the belongings of a mid-sequence transcendent, and he was also from the same sequence path as Chen Lun, which would be of extraordinary help to him. Let's keep looking, can't just give up like this. Chen Lun released the snake, then summoned a few mice, asking them to help search the manor for any signs. Since he was staying here for the next few days, if there were any clues, he could take the items at the first opportunity. Chen Lun speculated about Philip's legacy. If Philip had written the last entry in his diary just before his death, then it meant his body would also be here, ultimately releasing his spirituality, which would turn into mysterious objects. Chen Lun was very eager to get his hands on this mysterious object and also hoped to acquire the supernatural knowledge required to advance to Sequence 8. In my previous life, I never heard of a player obtaining this opportunity. Could it have been unintentionally obtained by an NPC? Chen Lun suddenly thought of Viscount Pompey's ring, a mysterious object. Could it be that the Viscount accidentally discovered this legacy and then claimed its contents for himself? He thought to himself, planning to search in the Viscount's villa, perhaps there he would find something. Chapter 65. A faint meow sounded in the back courtyard of the manor. Chen Lun looked towards the sound and saw a small white kitten hiding under a tree, calling out. It seemed somewhat malnourished, shivering. Chen Lun walked over and gently picked it up. Looking into the kitten's amber-colored eyes, he felt a hint of longing and pleading. From its weak cries, he gathered some intermittent, fragmented information. This was a stray cat's kitten, struggling to survive the hardships of life, abandoned by its mother. Starving and cold, it had sneaked through a gap in the manor's fence and, upon seeing Chen Lun, inexplicably took a great liking to this human, wanting to stay close to him and depend on him. "Lucky you, I was just about to go grab something to eat." Chen Lun stuffed it into his pocket and turned to leave. Afternoon. After finishing teaching Rebecca, Chen Lun burrowed into the villa's study to continue his treasure hunt. Binos the butler had specially instructed the maid to prepare a bowl of milk for the little white kitten. After eating and drinking its fill, it perked up and jumped around on Chen Lun's desk. "Did you complete the task I gave you?" Chen Lun's gaze shifted from the book in his hand to the little creature beside him. The little white kitten tilted its head in confusion, seemingly unaware of what he was talking about. "Well, you're too young to be a spy, that would be too much to ask of you." Chen Lun smirked. He had originally wanted the little white kitten to scout around the villa and confirm whether Viscount Pompey had already obtained Philip's legacy, but clearly, it was too young to understand such complex instructions. "Go play then." He stood up and continued to search through books. There were many books in the study, but with Chen Lun's efficient searching, more than half had already been gone through. As evening approached, he still had not found anything. Looking at the last wall of books remaining, Chen Lun sighed internally. Supernatural knowledge is indeed rare, even in the Viscount's study, I've only found one piece so far. At that moment, as usual, Binos knocked on the door, informing him that dinner time had arrived. Chen Lun put down the book in his hand and left with the little white kitten. At the dining table. "Mr. Jack, I specifically instructed the cook to prepare a dish for you, hee." Rebecca said. She turned her head to look eagerly at Chen Lun, her cheeks flushed. She had initially planned to keep it secret and wait until Mr. Jack saw his favorite dish before reminding him, then make an impression on him. But Rebecca couldn't hold it in. "Oh? I really appreciate your thoughtfulness, Miss Rebecca." Chen Lun smiled. Rebecca's heart leaped with joy, and she hurriedly signaled the maid to lift the lid. "Mr. Jack, this is a fine black cod." Binos added from the side. He knew Miss Rebecca's intentions and gave her his support. "Oh, I really like it. Thank you so much, Miss Rebecca, you are truly a thoughtful lady." Chen Lun cut a tiny piece of fish, forked it into his mouth, and chewed, showing an expression of enjoyment. In reality, he swallowed it directly. Rebecca was overjoyed and cast a grateful glance at Floey sitting next to Chen Lun. If it weren't for Miss Floey, she wouldn't have known that Mr. Jack liked fish. She was grateful that Floey had shared this secret, which had earned her praise from Mr. Jack. "Come on, Rebecca. You must deepen your relationship with Miss Floey and win over Mr. Jack eventually." Floey slightly turned her head, sensing Chen Lun's bitter emotions, a faint smile appearing on her lips. "Mr. Jack, please eat, it will affect the taste if it gets cold," Rebecca urged. "Ah, of course." Chen Lun sensed trouble, his finger hooked slightly under the table, emitting a faint light. "Meow." The little white cat leapt up, jumped onto the table, and then snatched the fish from the plate. The action was done in one fluid motion, completely ignoring everyone else. Rebecca was stunned, as were the Binos butler and Viscount and Viscountess Pompey. "Aha! It seems that Miss Rebecca's kindness is irresistible even to a little kitten." Chen Lun chuckled, trying to ease the awkward atmosphere. Hearing this, Rebecca's sullen mood slightly improved, though she secretly regretted it. Time quickly passed a week. A sensational piece of news spread through the entire Ember City. Congressman Daniel was assassinated. Countless residents were outraged. A good man who dared to speak up for and act on behalf of the common people, was brutally murdered. Protest. The security office of Amber City is ineffectual. It must be Congressman Daniel's proposals and stances that touched the interests of the nobles, they must have sent someone to assassinate His Excellency. The murderer must be severely punished. A large number of residents holding signs paraded on the streets like a dragon. There were also many workers who even went on strike, wearing dirty uniforms, joining the ranks and shouting themselves hoarse. However, such situations mostly occurred in the outer city district. The inner city district remained serene, and although the death of Congressman Daniel was shocking, it merely startled the elites, with many middle-class individuals actually clapping in approval. There had recently been an incident at the Garden Hotel, where Congressman Lawson's son died, and now there had been an assassination, leading to the death of Congressman Daniel. The elites felt insecure, so they covertly pressured the security office, hoping to improve the safety of the inner-city district. Each year, a hefty amount of taxes maintained the police and guards. How could they allow these high-ranking individuals to live in constant fear? Only a few elites, through the channels of the special department in the shelter, came to know some undisclosed secrets. They breathed a sigh of relief, cautiously making statements. As long as it did not concern them, they were actually safe. Outer City District. Low Tide Floral Bird Tavern. Today, the place was unusually empty, without a single customer. The heavily made-up landlady leaned against the corner, her eyes wide open, blood spilling from her mouth, with a large hole torn through her chest and abdomen. Clearly, she had been killed. In the backyard, the ground was covered with bodies, all members of the Iron Fist gang. A brown-haired young man stood erect at the building's entrance. At his feet knelt a headless corpse, burly in stature. The headless corpse's neck wound was jagged, as if a beast had bitten off the head. Sir, I don't know. I really don't know that person's identity. A member of the Iron Fist gang cowered before the young man, terrified. This unfamiliar man barged in, started slaughtering without a word. Even Gary the boss was killed by him in one move. It was just a fleeting glimpse. It seemed the stranger merely made a gesture, and Gary's head vanished. Fear spread in his heart. He dared not lie, spilling everything he knew. So, it was this person who killed Daniel's butler and took some of the craftsmen. The young man muttered to himself, looking forward. After killing Daniel, the oil paint viscount had him take over Daniel's unfinished business, so Vigri came to Low Tide. He shifted his gaze down to the headless corpse at his feet. Control the gang leader, scout out news about Viscount Pompey and Dolly? It seems the transcendent within Pompey Manor is indeed him. The young man's face showed contemplation and murderous intent. When was I exposed? It shouldn't be. Could it be divination-type supernatural methods? He pondered for a moment, then decided to make a trip back to Pompey Manor. Everything there was already considered his possession. No matter who this unknown enemy was, they were not allowed to covet it. Chapter 66. A ball of flame enveloped in black smoke slammed against the steel plate, instantly blackening it as the scorching air wave pushed outward in all directions. Boom! Another flame followed, this time condensed into a basketball-sized fireball, which with a thud smashed onto the steel plate, sticking to it like a persistent maggot and burning incessantly. It wasn't until a few minutes later that the flames extinguished, and the steel plate was burned red-hot, leaving behind some pits and melted traces on its surface. Well done, Connie. Chen Lun looked at the mechanical glove he was wearing and sincerely praised her. Connie's originally nervous expression instantly turned into joy. Thank you for your praise, Mr. Jack. This is the first prototype I made based on the drawings. I thought it had failed. The entrance of the small manor's warehouse. Chen Lun and Connie were testing the newly produced weapon. It looked slightly different from the previous Mad Hand, with more patterns on the surface, and under the reinforced glass, many precise gears and some small mechanical devices could be seen. Unnamed mechanical glove. Item description: a weapon made by a highly talented craftsman, imitating from a painting with mysterious objects. It can spray flames, or in high power mode, shoot high temperature fireballs. Paired with special synthetic fuel, it can adhere to targets, causing continuous burning damage. Flip a hand for stunning sparkles, cover a hand to annihilate. No, it's very successful, Connie. Chen Lun smiled, took off the glove, and handed it back to Connie. Since it's your creation, you should name it. Connie seemed surprised, then with a bit of excitement said. Mr. Jack, let's call it Connie No. 1. Those famous creations in history are named after their creators. I also wish. While speaking, Connie became somewhat embarrassed and her voice lowered. Chen Lun couldn't help but smile. He nodded, agreeing to the new glove's name. Although it wasn't very elegant, it was a great respect to Connie. Connie No. 1 mechanical glove. Very good, Connie, take this money, it's the reward you deserve. Chen Lun took out a small pouch containing a dozen gold pounds. Connie tried to refuse, but it was firmly placed in her palm. Your efforts and hard work should not be erased, Connie. Chen Lun smiled at her, then said. I have already made arrangements with the Iris Academy. In a few days, you will be able to go there to study. When you find the time, arrange for the craftsmen to continue producing Connie No. 1, also we need to produce some blunderbusses and ammunition. Chen Lun instructed her and left the small manor. Connie looked at his retreating figure, her hands tightly clutching the money pouch, moved. Don't worry, I won't let you down, Mr. Jack. Walking along the road, Chen Lun noticed that there were more patrol officers than usual. It was due to the death of Senator Daniel. Chen Lun's face was grim with thought. Things seemed to be heading in an unexpected direction, one he hadn't anticipated. Daniel, who should have died 2 years later, was assassinated ahead of time. Who was the assassin? Was it still Big Appetite Dolly? What had caused this butterfly effect to occur? Had he unwittingly flapped his wings? Lacking too many pieces of the clue puzzle, Chen Lun found it difficult to deduce the whole picture at the moment. But he knew that this matter had something to do with the Iron Fist gang. He remembered what Daniel's butler, Fedman, had said just before his death. Perhaps it was because of him that the control of the mastermind over the Iron Fist gang and those craftsmen was severed, thereby affecting a series of subsequent events. After all, it was related to the biggest matter he had been involved with concerning Senator Daniel. We'll face the soldiers as they come, and the flood as it rises. Chen Lun let out a breath. From his decision to save Floey, it was clear that Chen Lun was not afraid of the butterfly effect. Clutching to an all-knowing advantage for the sake of keeping the plot on track was a coward's act. Having crossed into this world, he had chosen to follow his heart, so he must press forward fearlessly. Chen Lun could benefit from his knowledge of the plot and was not afraid of the world line shifting due to his intervention. Because he believed in himself. Today Rebecca didn't want to go to classes. She nagged her parents for a long time and finally convinced them to let her take a day off. The backyard lawn of the manor. Rebecca sat on a swing, gazing at Mr. Jack, who was reading nearby. Floey was playing with a kitten at the table, their occasional light laughter mingling with the cat's interactions. The bright yet not dazzling sunlight poured down, creating a relaxed scene in the manor. By diligently reading, you have gained 195 experience points. Constellation Faction Mystic Book. Please observe patiently, progress 100%, has been thoroughly read through. You have gained an additional skill point and attribute point. Chen Lun exhaled and set down the book in his hands. It was the second book containing supernatural knowledge he had found through a comprehensive search in the study these days. Although he had not found any evidence of Viscount Pompey obtaining Philip's legacy, the acquisition of supernatural knowledge had alleviated some of his frustration. The only 2 pieces of supernatural knowledge in the study, I've already reaped the benefits from. Chen Lun felt secretly pleased. Apart from experience points, skill points, and attribute points, he had gained a new sequence pathway, the Constellation Faction, Sequence 9 Hunter. Counting the supernatural knowledge in his possession, he unknowingly had accumulated 4 pieces. Constellation, Earth, Nature, and Destiny. 2 sequences of the 7 true gods and 2 hidden sequence pathways offered more choices for the players when the time came. Chen Lun thought, when other players desperately sought the path to transcendence, those who encountered him would agonize over which to choose. He was really looking forward to such a scene. Miss Rebecca, Master Vigri has returned, the Viscount requests your presence. Butler Binos approached the backyard, bowed to Chen Lun's Floey, and then turned to Rebecca. I understand, Mr. Butler. Rebecca said. She declined Binos' offer and, looking at Chen Lun, inquired expectantly. Mr. Jack, could you push me there? It would be my pleasure, Miss Rebecca. Chen Lun packed up the book, walked over, and gently lifted Rebecca into the wheelchair. Mr. Jack is so strong. His embrace is also very warm. Rebecca looked ecstatic, while Floey walked up holding a white cat, its tail accidentally brushing Rebecca's face. Achoo! Rebecca sneezed and immediately covered her face in embarrassment. Oh, heavens! Mother Moon above! I just behaved so impolitely in front of him. How embarrassing! Mr. Jack surely won't laugh at me, will he? The anticipated laughter didn't come, and Rebecca felt the wheelchair begin to move. Turning her head to sneak a peek, she saw Miss Floey giving her an apologetic expression. Everyone arrived at the Viscount's villa. Upon entering the hall, Chen Lun saw Viscount Pompey and his wife chatting on the sofa with a young man. Rebecca, aren't you going to greet your brother? The young man with brown hair stood up and smiled at Rebecca. Ah! Brother Vigri. Rebecca said. The young man turned to Chen Lun and extended his hand. You must be Miss Rebecca's tutor, Mr. Jack, right? I've heard about you from my father. Thank you for your guidance to Rebecca and for your help at the Tiri Zoo. Chen Lun shook hands with him, his gaze sharpening momentarily. He then smiled politely as usual. It's what I ought to do, Mr. Vigri. After the two sat down, Viscount Pompey introduced. As I mentioned before, this is my foster son, Vigri. He is on a routine leave, so he came to visit. The young man smiled and nodded at Chen Lun. But a warning light lit up in Chen Lun's mind. The moment they shook hands, he received a prompt. Vigri's affection towards you has decreased, he is now hostile. Moreover, he sensed a strong threat emanating from this young man. He is a transcendent. The young man with brown hair scrutinized Chen Lun, thinking to himself as well. He sneered inwardly. It's you, then. This return, he distinctly felt that Viscount Pompey and his wife were far less enthusiastic about him than before, and even Rebecca seemed a bit distant. This made him angry, as if something of his had been taken away by someone else. Mr. Jack is currently staying at the estate, right? Vigri revealed a smile. After dinner, I will visit you, to seek some advice on literary matters. Chapter 67. The first floor hall of the backyard villa. Chen Lun and Vigri sat opposite each other at the long table. Floey had gone back to her room early to rest, and now only the two of them were in the hall. Mr. Jack, I heard you're a scholar from out of town. Vigri poured himself a glass of strong liquor. The orange glow from the electric light passed through the ice in the glass, merging with the amber color of the alcohol, distorting the young man's face. Yes, Mr. Vigri. I come from an inconspicuous small city in Rock State. Chen Lun picked up his glass and took a sip of milk. Didn't you want to talk to me about literary matters? Vigri didn't respond to him and glanced at the milk in his hand, chuckling softly. Mr. Jack's preferences are quite unique. Drinking milk at night helps with sleep. I suggest you try it, just one glass, and you're guaranteed to sleep better than a baby. Chen Lun gulped it down and let out a milk burp. Veins popped on Vigri's forehead, and his voice turned colder. Jack, I won't beat around the bush with you, the mystery circle of Amber City is not something an outsider can get involved in. Chen Lun wiped his mouth with a handkerchief. In a nutshell, the other party's words meant that the waters of Amber City were too deep for him to fathom. But Chen Lun didn't take the other's threat seriously. Since he wanted to quickly increase his strength, it was inevitable that he would get involved in some struggles. If possible, he would also like to lay low in one place like the supreme sword deity of a small town. But there was no time to allow for that. Whether it was Floey's death countdown, the arrival of the 1.0 version public beta players, or even the later ravaging of the Empire by the Red Apple Church, if these things were left unchecked, then Chen Lun's destiny would gradually slip out of his control. He didn't like the feeling of losing control. And it was too cowardly to hesitate and hold back. Chen Lun looked at the indifferent young man and thought it was a pity. If only he had the scout function that came with the player panel. Although he couldn't get comprehensive and specific information, he could know some basic details about the other party to make judgments. Let me remind you again, Jack, Pompey Manor and Outer City District's sewer beach craftsmen are Sir Oil Paint's things. In Amber City, no one can touch his stuff, not the church, not the shelter. Vigri said in a cold voice. Why not? Chen Lun retorted with a polite smile. This Sir Oil Paint you mentioned, is he a saint? Or an angel? Saints and angels are titles of respect for high sequence transcendence. Saints have transcended the mortal shell and even all life on earth, they are neither human nor ordinary transcendents. They have stepped into the category of mythical creatures. Angels, on the other hand, are beings closer to the end of a sequence. Each sequence path has a countable number of angels. They have another name sub-gods. If Sir Oil Paint is such a powerful being, then it's not just Amber City, even the Sun royal family of the royal city of Beryl wouldn't dare to offend him lightly. Jack, you're courting death. No sooner had Vigri spoken than he vanished from the chair. The next second, he was propping himself up over the table, pressing down a large hand towards Chen Lun's head. Bang! Chen Lun countered with an uppercut. Rhinoceros impact. A strong surge of air blasted outwards. The chair Chen Lun was sitting on instantly disintegrated. Vigri snorted coldly, a large mouthful of sharp teeth appeared in his palm and viciously snapped down. Crack! Squeak! Vigri's eyes narrowed. He saw that on his fist held in his palm, a layer of dark gold scales had grown, and white exoskeletons covered the knuckles. The serrated teeth scraped over, emitting a grating noise. Carp armor. Vigri was surprised that even the large mouth in his palm couldn't chew through this hard bone, so he let go and abandoned the grip. He pushed away Chen Lun's fist, brought his 5 fingers together to form a blade, and then slashed towards Chen Lun's neck. A row of sharp teeth emerged along the edge of Vigri's palm, like a meat saw chopping down. Swoosh hiss! Chen Lun dissipated the features on his arm and executed serpentine incarnation, his body twisting to dodge the attack. Vigri's hand turned into a blade, slicing off one side of the solid wood table as it brushed past the corner. With a thud, a loud bang resounded. Sawdust and dust filled the air. Suddenly, a gust of air pierced through the dust and struck Vigri fiercely. Bang! Scorpion tail needle. Vigri raised his hand to block Chen Lun's kick, the great impact causing him to retreat 2 steps. His entire arm started to engorge, muscles bulging and veins protruding as it turned into a red giant arm as if filling with air. Vigri furrowed his brow, spread his hand, and saw the big mouth in his palm writhing uncomfortably. Then he vomited, expelling a pool of black blood. Supernatural toxin. Vigri's complexion turned ugly. Flesh faction sequence 8 gourmet? From across the debris of tables and chairs, Chen Lun spoke softly. I thought you could eat anything. Vigri didn't say a word. The transcendent known as Jack was not weak, and Vigri had not gained an advantage. Since his opponent was not a weakling that could be squashed easily, he had no intention of continuing to stubbornly fight without knowing the other's capabilities. He gave Chen Lun a cold look, flung his arm to restore it to normal. Without another word, he turned and walked out the door. As soon as Vigri's figure disappeared from sight, Chen Lun exhaled a breath of foul air. He lifted his arm and inspected it, noting a clear bite mark on the back of his hand. A faint pain was also coming from his calf, where his last kick was blocked by Vigri's hand blade, inadvertently causing a cut from the counterforce. Fighting above one's level without using my trump card is still somewhat challenging. Chen Lun sighed inwardly. Although both sides were just probing and did not go all out in the recent exchange, Chen Lun had more or less gauged his current limits. If he let loose, he was confident he could barely hold his ground against his opponent. But as time went by, he would likely be defeated. After all, the opponent was a sequence higher than him, and the gourmet's abilities were far from limited to what had been seen. It was also possible that the opponent had unknown trump cards. Of course, if Chen Lun used his trump card, the outcome would remain uncertain. Simultaneously, Chen Lun also noticed some clues. This Vigri resembles Dolly a lot. Based on his memories, the Big Stomach King Dolly was a Sequence 8 gourmet, a transcendent who had half-stepped into the Sequence 7 ghoul. If he timed it right, Vigri in 2 years could have reached that stage. But on this alone, Chen Lun could not be certain. Because Dolly was a fat man with distorted facial features and ugly appearance. These characteristics Vigri did not possess. But one could not rule out the possibility that he might turn into that due to some accident along the original timeline in the next 2 years. Chen Lun secretly kept this speculation to himself. Are you okay? An ethereal voice carried from behind him, laced with concern. Floey had come down the stairs unnoticed and was standing nearby. She had been startled by the noise of the fight but was unable to assist, which left her feeling dejected. I'm fine. Chen Lun said with a smile. Looking at the disastrous state of the hall, he felt a headache coming on, unsure of how to explain it tomorrow. Was he supposed to tell Viscount Pompey that he had fought with his son? And why was there a corner of the table sliced off? Were the two of them fencing in the middle of the night? As Chen Lun was lost in thought, a voice suddenly resounded in his mind. Internal test begins. Countdown, 11 hours 59 minutes 58 seconds. Chapter 68. Chen Lun was startled. He suddenly realized he had missed this information. Because in his previous life, when he first encountered Era of Mystery, it was already the public beta version 1.0, so he had no recollection of any internal test. Now that he thought about it, there indeed had been a 3-day internal test. For players, the flow of time between reality and game was inconsistent, achieving a 1:5 ratio. The official explanation was that it maximized sleep time, thus extending human lifespan in such an innovative way. The 3 days of internal testing, converted to this world's time, amounted to 2 weeks. Chen Lun casually sat down on a chair and began to ponder. As he reminisced, he remembered more and more. It seemed that there were tens of thousands of slots for the internal test, and these were extremely valuable, even fetching hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because apart from a very few slots that were randomly selected from the public, most had already been reserved by big guilds, elite players, and streamers. An internal test was an early advantage, allowing one to familiarize themselves with the game world and get ahead from the starting line. As the world's first global holographic online game at the time, Era of Mystery contained endless business opportunities and wealth, which big consortiums could not afford to miss. The first batch of internal test players will arrive tomorrow morning, then. Chen Lun mused. But Amber City can't be the novice village, so meeting them will require a long journey and that isn't feasible with my time constraints. After a moment of contemplation, Chen Lun dismissed the idea of seeking them out. Tens of thousands of internal test players might seem like a lot, but spread out across the entire Sun continent, they were like a drop in the ocean, unable to make even a small splash. Instead of going to great lengths to find them in some remote towns, it was better to wait for opportunities to come. He planned on leveraging the Iron Fist Gang's intelligence advantage in the outer city district to keep an eye out for him. If they spotted anyone who might be a player, they could report back to him in a timely manner. The next morning, bright and early. 8 o'clock sharp. In Gem State, Fossil City, Emerald Town. Outside a rural farm fence, dozens of figures suddenly appeared out of thin air. Has the game started? Am I in the game world now? Damn. This is way too realistic. All were dressed in plain linen robes, resembling lower-class civilians. Almost every one of them wore expressions of shock and curiosity, with a few players even flopping to the ground to play with the weeds and soil. Wow! Not only does the soil smell like soil, the grass smells like grass, and how is this cow dung smell so authentic? Ew! A male player holding a clump of what seemed like old recipe ingredients vomited a few times, yet looked thrilled. In the corner, a few players were slightly more composed. Though equally curious about the new environment, they did not engage in any shocking performance art. A young man sporting a Polaris game ID stood quietly in place. He glanced at the successor of the old ways and those dancing players, then turned and walked toward the farm by himself. Hello, hello. Nice to meet you, my name is So King. A female player with wine-red hair ran up to him, calling out. Polaris stopped walking and looked up at the top of her head. Did you use your real name as your game ID? Ah, haha, yes, I debated over it a long time when I was lining up to enter the game and ended up using my own name. So King laughed. Polaris turned around and continued walking inside, not intending to chat with this woman. But So King followed him, behaving familiarly. Is there something you need? Polaris glanced at her. So King pouted and rolled her eyes at him. Can't you be less cold? We are, after all, among the first batch of internal testers, we should help each other. Then why don't you go find those others? Polaris pointed behind him without turning his head. So King turned to look back and saw several fellows joining the old clan, vomiting in place. But they seemed to be enjoying themselves, even jumping into the farm to roll in the dirt. She chuckled softly and turned back around. I think you're more reliable. So King slapped her chest and continued. I'm a full-time broadcaster and also run my own video channel, where I like to record content primarily focused on game narratives. This time, I finally got a slot in the closed beta and I plan to create some initial material. That's great, I'll definitely watch your video. Polaris said indifferently. Hey, let's collaborate. If we run into trouble, we can help each other out. I can let you have the resources first, how about that? So King said. We'll see when the time comes. Polaris leaped from a haystack into the farm, and So King quickly followed. You. She pursued relentlessly, gritting her teeth. As they walked, they saw a farmer wearing a straw hat busy in the stable. Hello? Is there anything we can help you with? Polaris stepped forward and tentatively asked. The farmer turned around and looked at them, his face immediately showing surprise. How did two strangers suddenly barge into his farm? Just as he was about to scold them, he paused sharply, then his expression turned to realization. He pointed towards two other barns and casually said. There are tools over there, you can help me cut the grass in the fields, collect and pack it, or you can feed the livestock or fetch some water. The farmer paused, tapping his head. Right, there's also a room whose roof has been damaged. If you can fix it, that would be even better. Don't worry, I'll compensate you. The next second, both Polaris and So King received a mission prompt. They exchanged glances and tacitly accepted the mission. Polaris glanced at his panel and tentatively used the scout skill on the farmer. Name, Tom. Race, human, Eastern continent. Level, 4. Life, 50/50ths. Profession, Farmer LV4. Attributes. Skills, Vigorous Thrust of Max. Combat Power, 5. Danger Level, Medium. Affection, Indifferent. Evaluation, even if he's a weakling, he can still stab you hard with a hay fork. Polaris didn't like attacking NPCs without reason, he decided to try doing the task first. So King had the same idea but did not follow Polaris to fetch tools right away. Instead, she walked up to the farmer and started conversing with him. Perhaps it was because the character So King created looked good, coupled with her gender, the farmer's attitude towards her was noticeably better than his attitude towards Polaris. After chatting for a while, So King noticed that slowly other players had also started coming in. She politely excused herself and left. The players behind them saw what they did and guessed that they could receive missions from the farmer, so they surged forward in a swarm. So King headed straight to the barn where Polaris had already come out holding 2 sickles. Here. Polaris handed one to her, and So King took it, chuckling softly. Ha, seeing as you're so proactive, I'll share some intelligence I've just gathered with you. Polaris raised an eyebrow, seemingly intrigued. So King lowered her voice, speaking mysteriously. As long as we earn enough for 5 copper crow entry tickets, we can enter Emerald Town. There are bound to be more opportunities there than out here in the wilderness, and, I heard that the Red Apple Church in town is being reconstructed. Maybe we can join them, might just give us a chance to gain supernatural strength. Chapter 69. Under the scorching sun. The ruins to the west had been cleared, and at this moment, a group of people were diligently working on construction. The recruited men were covered in dust, shouting as they carried and transported stone blocks together, while the women cooked a large pot of vegetable mushroom soup on the side. Polaris wiped the sweat from his forehead, finding his hands caked in black dirt. He sighed quietly. This won't do. Just being treated as low-level laborers doing simple and repetitive physical work. So King walked over, handing him a bowl of vegetable soup. Polaris thanked her and felt a bit more spirited after taking a sip of the soup. After completing their tasks on the rural farm and earning a few dozen copper cross, they had rushed to Emerald Town. As the farmer had mentioned, the Red Apple Church was indeed rebuilding their church, so they promptly signed up to participate. But contrary to their expectations, they didn't even meet the steward monk, just 2 church guardians who were here to direct them. Thus, their plan to join the church and obtain supernatural knowledge fell through. It's never that simple after all. Polaris drank the soup to the last drop, returned the bowl to So King, and remarked with a sigh. It's not entirely fruitless. You unlocked the worker sub-occupation, and I unlocked the cook sub-occupation. So King said, offering comfort. Those people still at the farm probably have their occupation fields blank on their panels. Polaris thought of the other players and couldn't help but sneer. Before they left, they saw players who couldn't bear it any longer attacking the NPC on the farm, though for unknown reasons. Perhaps they wanted to kill the farmer to seize the farm's resources and wealth, or maybe they were simply testing the game mechanics, or they even considered that NPC as a monster to farm for experience to level up. However, all players who acted were killed by the farmer with a single strike from a pitchfork. Even though he was just an ordinary NPC from a novice village, dealing with these new players who had just entered the game was quite easy. What was more laughable, after resurrecting, those few guys were chased and killed again by the farmer's dog, and that dog even stood guard at the resurrection point outside the farm. Having used up their 3 daily resurrection chances, those players had wasted their day. The precious closed beta time was frittered away, and if they continued to court death the next day, using up all 10 weekly resurrection opportunities, they could pretty much consider their participation in this closed beta a bust. Do you know how this church got destroyed, Polaris? So King suddenly asked. Polaris snapped back to reality, surprised. Wasn't it because of an accidental fire? That's what he had heard from the workers when he arrived, but he quickly realized So King wouldn't be asking if that was the case. What did you find out? Polaris suddenly felt that partnering with this woman wasn't such a bad thing. So King indeed knew something, and she giggled. I just learned from a lady that, a month ago, the Red Apple Church was attacked. All the clergy and guardians here were killed, and the church was burned down by that person. Polaris was taken aback when he heard this. As an experienced gamer in the online gaming world, he always prepared well before diving into a new game. Even though the information released before the official start of Era of Mystery was limited, he had captured some through various channels. Among other things, he knew that the entire Sun continent had factions for the 7 true gods, and that each represented a path to a supernatural sequence and was a significant force holding supernatural powers. The audacity of someone attacking the church so brutally meant they were no ordinary thug. "Hey, guys, sorry to interrupt." A man's voice came through, and Polaris and So King turned to look. They saw 3 men approaching, clad in the same burlap robes as themselves, with their game IDs displayed above their heads clearly. They were 3 players. "I'm an executive of the Hall of Valor Guild, Horseman. These 2 are members of the God's Love Guild, Doghead Gold, and Forget No Taboo." The leading man, Horseman, extended his hand with a smile. "Are you interested in cooperation? We could start by exchanging information." Polaris and So King exchanged a glance and nodded. He shook hands with Horseman and asked, "What kind of cooperation?" "Let's talk somewhere else, it's too hot here." The Horseman pointed helplessly to the sun above and tugged at his soaked placket. "Fine." Polaris replied curtly. He turned around and applied to quit his job as a church guardian, and ended up getting only 1/10 of his wages, a mere few copper cross, along with a bout of scolding. But he did not care. The group found a shady spot to rest, and the Horseman sat down before speaking first. "There are few people in the internal test, you 2 managed to arrive here ahead of the main force, so I'm sure you are wise enough to understand the importance of gaining an early advantage. Our collaboration would definitely yield better results than going at it alone." The others nodded, showing agreement with his statement. The Horseman continued. "To show my sincerity, let me share some internal information from our guild. Remote towns like this usually have an official supernatural organization, a shelter, and 1 or 2 other church factions. Although they are the most direct channels to obtain supernatural knowledge, the difficulty is extremely high." Polaris hummed in acknowledgement, mentioning the futile effort he and So King had made at the Red Apple Church today. "You can't do it like this." The Horseman shook his head. "The 3 of us never planned to go there from the start, the difficulty is too high, the cycle too long, and since the Empire offers opportunities in every town, there's no need to stubbornly stick it out here." Doghead Gold and Forget No Taboo both chuckled lightly. "We took a wolf hunting quest at that farm. Lucky for us, we even unlocked the battle sub-occupation of wolf hunter." So King pursed her lips in annoyance, finding these 2 guys truly obnoxious, wondering what they were showing off for here. She promptly shared some of the information she knew as well. The Horseman's eyes lit up after hearing her. "The person you're talking about, is he still in Emerald Town? Someone capable of taking down a church branch single-handedly must be a transcendent. If we can start with him, our chances of obtaining supernatural knowledge would be greatly improved. He should have left already, I saw the wanted poster the Red Apple Church posted." So King took out a piece of paper she had collected. It depicted a young man with black curly hair and an indistinct face, the name Jack written below him, and his suspected identity as a member of the History and Ritual Association marked, along with a bounty of 100 gold pounds. If Chen Lun saw this wanted poster, he would certainly be surprised. Because the Red Apple Church had even employed the divination faction's supernatural power to learn his alias, and the cost must not have been small. This showed just how deep the Red Apple Church's hatred for him ran. Such a pity. Learning that the tough character wasn't in town, the Horseman shook his head regretfully. He immediately suggested, "We need to make the most of the precious time of the internal test and not waste effort here. It's better to explore the surrounding map and find a big city first, so we can get ahead of others when the official test starts. But we're out of money, the cost of a long journey would be considerable." Polaris frowned as he spoke. The Horseman smiled, pointing out the disadvantage of lone wolves, the lack of crucial information. "There's usually a train station near small towns, we can take that to the nearest city. The price isn't expensive, just a few dozen copper cross will do. Let's think about it," Polaris said. The Horseman nodded, and Polaris stepped aside to whisper a few words with So King. In a little while, the 2 came back. "All right, we agree to this plan, what do we need to do?" "Good." The Horseman nodded in satisfaction. "It's a bit of a distance from here to the train station, and we don't have enough money to hire a carriage and guard, so we have to walk. There are likely to be robbers and wild monsters like thieves along the way, higher in level and very dangerous. So, we not only need to gather enough fare in the shortest time but also come up with a way to get a set of gear to protect ourselves on the road." Polaris and So King nodded. "Okay, we'll act separately and set off before tomorrow. Chapter 70. He placed the box in a corner of the attic and covered it with a black cloth. Several similar boxes were already neatly arranged nearby, containing blunderbusses and some ammunition, all crafted by the team led by Connie. There were already 30 to 40 completed pieces. After the initial adjustments, along with Connie's guidance, the craftsmen had improved rapidly, and the team's efficiency had increased significantly. Chen Lun had once handed a repeater flintlock gun to Connie for disassembly, but she had stated that she couldn't replicate it because it used some special materials and parts. Without blueprints, she couldn't manufacture it. Chen Lun felt regret for a while, and finally, he could only sigh and comment that the shelter's supernatural workshop was damn cunning with such a good security mechanism. Then, he took out a pair of Connie No. 1, the first piece truly crafted. The previous prototypes had been taken back by Connie, as she had found several flaws and had improved them. These gloves, to a certain extent, are better suited to handle low-sequence transcendence. Their lethal capacity is stronger than a regular firearm, comparable to a typical Combat Series D-class mysterious object. And I can mass-produce these. This is indeed a great path to fortune, he mused. Chen Lun stored them away as one of his trump cards. After tidying up the attic, he planned to have his coachman take him to Pompey Manor to teach Rebecca. Currently, it was almost certain that Philip's legacy was not in the backyard, and Viscount Pompey seemed not to have got his hands on this treasure, so Chen Lun decided to focus his efforts on rescuing Floey. In this period, apart from Vigry's probing, everything else had been calm, and he and Floey had moved back to his small villa. With only a month left, time was of the essence. He had pinpointed Vigry, Viscount Pompey's adopted son, a Sequence 8 gourmet transcendent, who was very likely Dolly himself. However, the night after their encounter, Vigry had left the Pompey Manor. According to the Viscount, it was because the military had urgently recalled him, interrupting his leave. But Chen Lun silently doubted this explanation. Clearly, Vigry had decided not to stay at the manor after his probing attempt failed, avoiding conflict with Chen Lun. Now, this man was most likely hiding in the shadows, ready to strike a fatal blow at any time. Baron Barney, the Black Knife Brotherhood, now Vigry, and his so-called oil paint Viscount, Chen Lun treated it as if being infested with lice, and overwhelmed in debt one more problem didn't make a difference. All these issues revolved around Pompey Manor, linked to that ominous mission. With the enemy hidden and him exposed, he was at a great disadvantage. Chen Lun continued to build up his strength while awaiting the moment to counterattack. Recently, Connie has come up with some great stuff, and I've integrated 2 characteristics to develop a new skill. You'd better not let me catch you, or you'll have hell to pay. A few days later. Clang clang. Woo. Polaris sat on the train, watching the scenery outside the window. Their group had gone through struggles and hardships and had finally managed to board the train to the major city. Leaving Emerald Town for the train station, they encountered 4 groups of bandits. The smaller groups had 3 to 4 robbers, while the larger ones had about a dozen. If there were fewer enemies, they could fight desperately to kill 1 or 2, but with more, they faced annihilation. Lately, they had wisened up, fleeing immediately when the odds weren't in their favor. The bandits, encountering such prey, would chase them for a distance before giving up. Then, they would bypass that area and continue their journey. On average, each person had died 2 or 3 times on the road. It was quite a challenging journey. Fortunately, the resurrection point wasn't too far from where they died, otherwise, it would have been really nerve-wracking. This was the price of pioneering uncharted territories, but once they got through it, the future was bright. Ding ding ding. The next stop is Amber City platform. If you're getting off, hurry up. The stop will last only half an hour. A middle-aged man in a uniform and cap, ringing a small bell, reminded passengers along the aisle. We'll get off here in a moment. The next major city is even further, a 5 to 6 day journey, and we don't have that much time. Horseman said, sitting across from Polaris. Polaris and Soking nodded, indicating they understood. The train soon arrived at the station, crowded with a throng of people carrying backpacks and suitcases. After undergoing checks by police and Empire guards, Polaris and his companions were issued temporary identity cards, restricted to activities within the outer city district. Once out of the train station, Horseman asked about their next plan. We should split up to gather information more efficiently. Polaris, not used to taking orders, which was why he preferred to work alone than join any guild, agreed reluctantly. Then let's add each other as friends and stay in touch online if there's any news. The horseman neither agreed nor disagreed, simply showing a face full of regret as he spoke. After Polaris and So King had added each other as friends with the group, both parties went their separate ways on the spot. Walking away, Doghead Gold sneered. Those two fools really can be naive. By following us, they could have shared some internal information. Fighting alone in such a big city will definitely make it hard to move an inch. The horseman glanced at the two of them and laughed. Forget it, everyone has their own ambitions. When they regret it, they'll have to offer valuable information to exchange for our help. He pondered for a moment, then tentatively asked. Speaking of which, what is the initial goal of your god's love? What do you think, brother horseman? Our three major guilds' think tanks all more or less have the same direction. First, lay down an informational foundation to pave the way for the main forces to come. Forget No Taboo chuckled lightly. Don't tell me your Hall of Valor isn't doing this. The horseman laughed heartily, then patted Forget No Taboo on the shoulder. Of course, that's exactly it. So no need for me to say where we're headed next, right? Let's go, find the big shots in the outer city district, join them. Although we can't get supernatural knowledge, it's a good place to establish a foothold. Forget No Taboo said. The three figures gradually disappeared into the distance. Polaris and So King stood outside the train station, discussing their next move. However, after a long while, neither of them had any clue. We can't possibly go back to manual labor, right? Isn't that the same as just switching places to work? So King said, despondently. No choice, we don't have much money left. We might have to sleep on the streets tonight. Polaris said calmly. Upon hearing this, So King suddenly became furious, her eyes widened. No way. I still want to find a place to take a bath. This game is too realistic, I feel like I stink. That's great, you can record all these experiences to capture the harshness and realism of this world. So King rolled her eyes. Please, no one wants to watch the daily life of a beggar, okay? They chatted briefly, and seeing that it was gradually getting dark, decided to take a walk around first. Unknowingly, the two arrived at Denton Street. But they hadn't taken many steps before they encountered two patrolling guards. Hey! You two! The guards looked at their attire, a hint of contempt flashing in their eyes. Show your ID. Polaris glanced at the guards' armor and short swords, and obediently handed over the temporary identification they had gotten from the train station. After the guards casually glanced at it, their eyebrows furrowed. Clang! One of them drew his short sword on the spot, pointing it at Polaris and So King. Your temporary ID has expired. Come with me to jail now. So King was startled, and Polaris's heart sank. He knew that these two guards saw them as newcomers and were planning to extort them. Money could solve the problem, but the issue was they had no money. If they were captured and kept in jail, this beta test would basically be blown. What should we do? So King sent a private message surreptitiously. Polaris began to feel a slight headache. Chapter 71. Today was her first day attending courses at the Yellow Iris Academy. The teacher's lecture was excellent, and although she already possessed some of the knowledge, she gained a fresh perspective on it. In addition to that, there was a lot of knowledge that couldn't be learned in the outer city district, such as horsemanship, chess, music, and dance, and every month, there were special etiquette teachers who taught them the various etiquettes of high society, as most of the graduates from Yellow Iris Academy could find a decent job in the inner city district. These etiquettes were essential skills for survival in the inner city district. There were a lot of middle-class and even wealthy merchants in the inner city district whose alma mater was this academy. But the only thing that made Connie distressed was that her classmates seemed to look down on her. Some lady, upon learning that she came from the outer city district, dubbed her Miss Grease Spot. Even the life administrator, Mrs. Judy, took her aside to advise her not to wear clothes stained with machine oil to class next time. Connie somewhat anxiously set down her bag, thinking if she should take some time to go out and buy new clothes. Mr. Jack had rewarded her with a substantial sum of money, and it was time to replace the old clothes she had worn for many years. Her eyes caught sight of a letter on the desk, and her face suddenly changed color. Oh no! I forgot about the task Mr. Jack entrusted to me. She exclaimed in alarm, snatched up the letter, and dashed out the door. Mr. Jack had written this letter a few days ago, asking her to deliver it to the Iron Fist Gang, to their boss Gary. It was just that she had been so busy in the warehouse these days, and she was particularly looking forward to school today, that she'd forgotten about it. Speaking of the Iron Fist gang, Connie had always been astonished. Initially, she and Miss Floey were nearly kidnapped, but Mr. Jack saved them. Unexpectedly, the entire Iron Fist gang later became a vassal of Mr. Jack, with their boss Gary obeying Mr. Jack's commands. Descending to the second floor, she pushed open the door of the coachman's room, preparing to have him drive her to the outer city district. The coachman in bed, upon seeing Connie open the door, hurriedly stuffed the book he was holding under the pillow and then awkwardly stood up. "What are you reading, coachman?" Connie looked at the suspicious man with a skeptical eye. "Ah, nothing much, just some miscellaneous books," the coachman said, turning his body and with all seriousness added. "Are you looking to go out?" "Miss Connie, I'll get ready right away." Connie, in a hurry, didn't press further. But she did catch a glimpse of the magazine poking out from under the pillow, whose cover seemed to feature the long legs of a lady in black silk. Connie's face turned slightly red as she turned and left the room. It seems unlikely that Mr. Jack would also enjoy these types of magazines. He's a true gentleman, Connie thought to herself. Once the carriage reached the outer city district. Passing by Denton Street, Connie pulled back the curtain to see if Mrs. Caroline was busy in the flower shop, to greet her in passing. Instead, she saw a man and woman, both looking like lower-class civilians, being questioned by the patrol guard. Seeing this, Connie's brow furrowed slightly. She was suddenly reminded of Mr. Jack and Miss Floey. They must have experienced similar situations when they first arrived in Amber City, hadn't they? Having lived in the outer city district for many years, Connie knew all too well the greed of these patrol guards. They did not actively pursue criminals, instead, they often troubled the lower-class civilians, demanding bribes. Connie called for the carriage to stop and stepped out. "If you don't want to come with us to jail, you can, for a bail of 20 silver ducats, we'll let you off today," came the self-righteous voice of the guard from a distance. "Is there any chance you could lower that amount? We don't have that much money on us." King pleaded pitifully, but the guard was unimpressed and scoffed instead. "No money? That's fine, you come with us, and we'll let your man go." "He's not my man." "And what exactly do you two old lechers think you're doing?" King suddenly exploded in anger, cursing outright. That was it. Polaris couldn't stop it in time, and now things had escalated. Having angered the guards, they had no room to maneuver and might be directly imprisoned, or even killed on the spot if they resisted. Even if they were resurrected, they would likely be wanted and have difficulty moving around in the outer city district. "Fine. Come with us now." The corner of the guard's eye twitched, and he brandished his sword on the shoulders of So King and Polaris, threatening them. So King still wanted to resist, and the guard was about to prod her with his sword to give her a taste of pain. "Stop!" Connie shouted. All eyes turned toward her. The guard sized up the girl, her uniform grubby, a typical girl from the outer city district. "I would advise you not to meddle in this, girl," he said menacingly. "They are new servants hired by Jack's estate, you've misunderstood. Here are 20 silver ducats, let them go," Connie said, taking out a handful of silver coins and sliding them over after counting them. So King and Polaris looked at the girl who was a stranger to them in surprise, not expecting her to be willing to help them out. The two guards were stunned, not expecting to encounter such a fool. The lead guard took another look at Connie, unable to tell that the girl actually had some money. "You heard wrong, I said it's 20 silver ducats per person, so that's 40 silver ducats for two," the guard said with a smile. A greedy glint flickered in his eye as he glanced at Connie's purse. Connie suppressed her anger and remained silent for a few seconds before taking out another 20 silver ducats from her pocket. "Wait, how can you, a girl from the outer city district, have so much money? I suspect you're involved in a crime, possessing ill-gotten wealth. Show us your identity proof," the guard said, no longer interested in the silver ducats in Connie's hand, but staring intently at her purse. Inside it, there must be at least a few dozen more silver ducats, and perhaps even gold pounds. "Miss, perhaps we should just let it go, and we'll go with them," So King said through clenched teeth. Even though she knew this was just a game, everything felt so realistic that So King didn't want to see a good person get in trouble because of her. It would be no big deal to just die and waste a resurrection opportunity. However, since she had not joined any forces or accepted any quests and had no connections with the people or things of this map, it was possible that the resurrection point would not be within Amber City. She might just miss this beta test. As a small live streamer, her desire to chase after early advantages was not that strong. After all, she had recorded some material along the way, enough to make a pretty good video. But the loss for Polaris would be much greater. As a lone wolf, missing this beta test would greatly increase the difficulty to break into the first tier. She would find a way to make it up to him later. So King inwardly sighed. Hey! It's not up to you to say if this counts or not. The guard said with a sneer. He pointed his short sword at Connie. What Jack Estate? Never heard of it. Their identities are unknown, and they are suspected culprits. Now, you're very likely the mastermind behind them, and you must come with us. By now, quite a crowd had gathered around, pointing and discussing the situation. But most of them, used to such sights, shook their heads and walked away. Oh! Connie! The voice of Mrs. Caroline came through. She was holding scissors and a fresh flower, hurrying through the crowd. What has happened here? Chapter 72. A hint of dread flashed across the guard's face. The flower shop under the Viscount Pompey Bruce's patronage was well known to these patrol guards from the outer city district. If it wasn't necessary, they certainly didn't want to offend Viscount Pompey. Connie was unaware of the relationship between Mrs. Caroline and Viscount Pompey, so she didn't want to get Mrs. Caroline involved and simply shook her head in silence. The two guards exchanged a look, knowing they couldn't drag this out any longer. All right, break it up. One guard started to disperse the bystanders, while the other prepared to escort the three away with his sword at the ready. At this moment, the coachman tied the horse to a lamppost and hurried over. He sensed that something was amiss. Miss Connie seemed to be encountering trouble. He then remembered something Mr. Jack, his employer, had instructed him. Miss Connie. The coachman approached Connie and discreetly handed her a silver badge. Mr. Jack said to use this if you run into any trouble. Connie's face lit up with joy as she took it. What are you whispering about? The guard scolded. Connie sneered and shoved the silver badge in the guard's face. Are you sure you want to arrest us? The two guards were taken aback. The silver badge they were now looking at bore a family crest with the inscription Pompey Bruce below. They couldn't fail to recognize it. It was the badge of identity for Viscount Pompey. Nobody dared to falsely claim the name of a local noble in Amber City lightly, as it was too easy to be exposed and arrested for the impersonation. To produce the crest of the Viscount Pompey demonstrated a significant connection. The guards felt a growing anxiety, immediately realizing that trouble was brewing. Aha! So you do know His Excellency Viscount Pompey? Why didn't you say so sooner? The guard wiped the sweat from his forehead with a smile. Truly sorry, we made a mistake. All right, then you're free to go. You derelict scoundrels! Mrs. Caroline, having grasped the cause of the incident, reproached them angrily. Poor Connie had just lost her father, and life must have been difficult since accompanying little Jack to the inner city district. And now, back in the outer city district, even the guards were extorting her. It was an insult she did not deserve. I will definitely write to the security office. I'll see you two sorry excuses get what's coming to you. Mrs. Caroline rebuked. The two guards were somewhat irritated but helpless. If it came to a confrontation, they would be the losers. After all, if the matter reached the security office and disturbed Viscount Pompey, their immediate superiors would certainly punish them. So, apologizing profusely, the guards quickly skedaddled. Mrs. Caroline continued to curse at their retreating backs, while Connie stepped forward to console her. Miss, thank you very much for your help. King expressed her gratitude. Connie turned her head and, looking at the man and woman, revealed a slight smile. It was nothing. Polaris suddenly thought of the Jack estate the girl had mentioned and wondered if it could have any connection to the notorious Jack who was wanted by the Red Apple Church in Emerald Town. Polaris discreetly used Scout on Connie without drawing attention. Name, Connie. Race, human, Eastern Continent. Level, 13. Life, 120/120. Profession, Craftsman LV10, Max, Butler LV3. Attributes. Skills, Genesis Genius LV2, Passive, Flash of Genius LV3, Passive, Integration Mastery of Max, Passive. Combat Power, 12. Danger Level, High Level. Affection, Friendly. Evaluation, You don't want to know what weapons she's carrying because by the time you see them, you'll be dead. A friendly reminder, her boss is no simpleton. Polaris was startled, never having expected this seemingly harmless girl to be so strong. That orange danger level signified she was not someone to be trifled with. As for the description of her boss mentioned in the evaluation, could it really be that ruthless individual? If so, this could be a great opportunity. King, this girl is an opportunity. Cling to those coattails, and there might be a surprise in store. Polaris sent a short message. King was slightly taken aback, then looked towards Polaris and nodded gently to show she understood. Miss, we are from the countryside, strangers here, looking for a job to make a living. May I ask about the Jack Manor you mentioned, do they still need people? Please rest assured, we can work without pay, as long as we have a place to eat and stay. King said to Connie with a pitiful look. These lines were all dictated privately to her by Polaris. Connie showed a troubled expression, wanting to help the young man and woman but not feeling that she could make decisions for Mr. Jack. Oh, so young Jack has already secured a foothold in the inner city district? Mrs. Caroline asked. Yes, Mrs. Caroline. Mr. Jack has bought a large manor and is now tutoring Viscount Pompey's daughter, Miss Rebecca. Connie spoke of Mr. Jack with great pride. She briefly discussed their situation after moving to the inner city district, and Mrs. Caroline repeatedly marveled, believing that Jack was no ordinary person and was bound to make something of himself in the future. Mrs. Caroline then recalled something, fell silent for a moment, and then smilingly invited Connie to sit in her flower shop. Polaris and King were also included in this invitation. Connie, thinking that she still had to deliver a letter for Mr. Jack, felt somewhat troubled. Let's go, Connie, come in for a cup of flower tea. I've missed you so much since you left. Faced with Mrs. Caroline's warm invitation, Connie finally nodded. Discover stories with Empire. She glanced at Polaris and King and said with a smile. Then follow me for now. I need to ask Mr. Jack about the job, so I can't give you an answer just yet. But Mr. Jack is a kind and upright gentleman, I think he will help you. Polaris and King were immediately overjoyed. Everyone entered the flower shop and took a seat while Mrs. Caroline prepared some flower tea for them. Just a moment, Connie. Mrs. Caroline said softly. She then left the flower shop and went up a side staircase. Polaris sipped the flower tea and suddenly received a short message. Polaris friend, this is Horseman. We've found an opportunity in the outer city district, near the sewer strand. There's an underground force called Iron Fist Gang with lots of benefits. Come quickly. Also, I'll tell you a secret, the boss here, Mr. Dolly, is a transcendent. Polaris was slightly startled and turned to look at King, who also had a surprised expression. It seemed she too had received the message from Horseman. What do you think? Shall we go? King asked. Polaris frowned slightly, he didn't want to let go of the opportunity at hand. Wait for a bit. The trio representing two major guilds wouldn't be sharing an opportunity for free, and upon going there, they would most likely have to pay a price. If it had been earlier, Polaris might have gone, but now that he had met Connie, he had a choice. Opportunities found on one's own are always the best. Soon after, Mrs. Caroline came downstairs with 2 letters in her hand. She handed one to Connie. Connie, could you please deliver this letter to little Jack for me, and have him pass it on to Mr. Pompey? And tell him that I don't blame him, Henry has always seen him as the best of friends. Connie tipped the letter in her hand, noticing there seemed to be a metal object within. Of course, Mrs. Caroline. Mrs. Caroline let out a sigh of relief, as if she had let go of years of pent-up feelings. She smiled, waved the other letter in her hand, and looked at the 3 young people. Don't worry, I will surely report those 2 guards who troubled you. Connie was touched but amused, feeling the warmth as well. She thanked her, finished her flower tea, and stood up ready to say goodbye. Just at that moment, Polaris and King suddenly received a mission alert. Triggered D-level mission, save Connie. Mission description, entrusted by her boss Mr. Jack, Connie is to deliver a letter to the Iron Fist Gang at the sewer strand. However, times have changed, and the Iron Fist Gang has a new leader. If Connie steps into the territory of the Iron Fist Gang, she will be in danger. Whether to reason with Connie to stop her from delivering the letter is up to you. Mission reward, 200 experience points, 1 silver ducat, and increased affection with Connie. Chapter 73. He had not expected things to fall into place so coincidentally the faction the horseman had joined turned out to be Connie's enemy. How will you choose, Polaris? I, for one, won't just stand by and watch her walk into death. So King sent a message and gave him a look. Polaris pondered for a moment and then nodded. All right, we'll take this mission path and take a gamble. At least you have some conscience, she just helped us a moment ago. Seeing So King's text message, Polaris rolled his eyes secretly. Woman, aren't you getting too caught up in this drama? It's just a game. Polaris was simply considering the matter from a perspective of benefit, they needed only to pay a trifling price to earn her favor, making it easier to get close to the big shot behind her. That was much better than joining the faction of the horsemen. Over there, one could work oneself to death without any guarantee of reward. More importantly, the horsemen represented two major guilds. At the moment, they were treating them courteously on the surface, but once the open beta started and their main forces settled in, they would no longer show any mercy. They would certainly use all means to drive away a lone wolf like him in order to monopolize the benefits. Years of gaming experience had given Polaris a clear understanding of these guild players. Polaris and So King accepted the mission. Miss Connie, are you going to the underwater shallows? So King stood up and inquired. Connie looked surprised but nodded anyway. Yes. The two of you just wait here for me. I'll be back after I'm done with my business, and then we can go back to the inner city district together. Your journey continues with Empire. So King secretly communicated with Polaris, choosing her words carefully. Miss Connie, I heard that the underwater shallows is quite chaotic. The biggest gang there, the Iron Fist Gang, their boss Gary was recently killed. Could there be danger if you go? So King expressed her concern. Connie was startled. Is what you're saying true? She looked puzzled. How come you two know this? The friends who came with us, they went to make a living at the underwater shallows and told us the news. So King composed her speech and directly sold out the horseman. After hearing this, Connie looked troubled, holding the letter from Mr. Jack and then looking at Mrs. Caroline's letter. Are you sure about your information? Connie asked again for confirmation. Positive. Polaris and So King nodded in unison. Connie no longer hesitated, she immediately bid Mrs. Caroline farewell and prompted the two to leave with her. Once out of the flower shop, the three boarded the carriage. I will explain this matter to Mr. Jack. I'm very thankful for your warning. Connie pondered for a moment, if what these two said was true, then she was indeed in danger. Polaris and So King were delighted. They both received a mission completion prompt, and Connie's affection towards them had increased. When the carriage passed the checkpoint on the bridge, Connie likewise took out the Pompey clan emblem to vouch for Polaris and allowed them to enter the inner city district without any issues. After passing through multiple layers of protection, Polaris inwardly felt grateful for how right his decision had been. We are very lucky, this inner city district should be a high-level map for us. Being able to enter here, we've already pulled ahead of the other players. So King saw the message from Polaris and also felt joyful. Let's hope that meeting the big shot behind Connie will bring us some gains. Polaris was secretly expectant. Dusk was falling. The carriage moved slowly and eventually entered Jack's manor. After getting off the carriage, Polaris and So King curiously observed their surroundings, while the coachman informed Connie that he needed to go to Pompey Manor to pick up Mr. Jack. Connie nodded and watched the carriage leave again. You two can rest in the living room on the first floor of the villa, and Mr. Jack will be back soon. Connie said softly. Polaris and So King nodded, their faces full of anticipation. When Chen Lun finished work and boarded the carriage, the coachman informed him of the day's events. Connie brought two people back. Chen Lun was inwardly puzzled. Back at the manor, he found Connie waiting for him at the entrance. After getting out of the carriage, Connie handed over both letters to him and explained the events that had unfolded. You've worked hard, Connie. Chen Lun said with a smile as he put away the letter. Connie, however, shook her head, clearly embarrassed. I'm sorry, Mr. Jack, I failed to complete the task you gave me on time, and I also brought back two people without permission. It's okay, go and rest. Chen Lun consoled her, then added a word of caution. Next time you encounter strangers who are both unfamiliar and odd, be careful. You can let me know first. Yes, Mr. Jack. Connie, with a shy look of embarrassment, bowed and left. Watching her leave, Chen Lun sighed to himself. Connie's kindness was excessive, and if she were to encounter someone with malicious intent, it could very well harm her. He decided to find an opportunity to tell her the story of the farmer and the snake. However, it was also due to meeting those two people that they had been able to save Connie with their warning. Chen Lun then reflected on himself. His old gamer mentality hadn't fully shifted yet. Now that he was in this dangerous world surrounded by living, breathing people, he should be more considerate of their safety. For tasks like delivering messages next time, I should have animals do it. After contemplating, he thought of the Iron Fist gang. As for what those two said about Gary being killed, while the Iron Fist gang wasn't critical to him, they were useful for handling various trivial matters. Normally tied up with countless tasks, the gang saved him time. Having them taken away was, to say the least, quite irritating. Since Connie had brought back the two who knew something, it was time to inquire further. And moreover, those two are probably players. Chen Lun squinted his eyes. He walked straight into the villa and immediately spotted Polaris and So Qiang sitting on the sofa. The two sat upright, neither seeming to interact, both seemingly lost in thought. Chen Lun knew that they were probably using the panel for private communication. Ahem. He purposely coughed, and the two startled in response. Mr. Jack. Hello. So Qiang stood up and forced a smile. The young man with slightly curly black hair before her was oddly handsome. Dressed in a black suit with a short cape, topped with a top hat, he slowly removed his brown leather gloves. An indescribable sense of mystery and a formidably powerful aura washed over them. It's him, isn't it? Though I don't know the specifics of his appearance, the characteristics of the man on the wanted poster are very similar to his. It shouldn't be wrong. Wow! This NPC is terrifying. Polaris replied with a brief message, internally shocked. Because he had discreetly used Scout on this Mr. Jack. Name, Jack Spett. Race, human, Eastern Continent. Level. Life. Profession. Attributes. Skills. Combat power. Danger level, extremely lethal. Affection, indifferent. Evaluation, my advice, kid, is to leg it as far as you can. In the game, once over level 20, no basic information was visible. Coupled with the deep red danger level, Polaris felt almost breathless. Jack's affection for you has decreased, currently it's loathing. Polaris was taken aback. What did I do? Why does he loathe me on sight? He glanced at So Qiang, but her expression remained unchanged. So it's directed at me, then, Polaris thought, feeling a lump in his throat. Prying into others' privacy is very impolite, Mr. Polaris. Chen Lun said with a polite smile as he pulled up a chair to sit and gestured for them to take a seat as well. Polaris was in turmoil. He actually knew I used Scout. What kind of NPC is this? There's something wrong with him. He must be cheating, right? Chapter 74. He glanced inadvertently over the heads of the two, at the two gleaming game IDs that clearly revealed their status as players. This was something Chen Lun had not anticipated. It turned out that just like the players, he could see their game IDs. With this, wouldn't the players have nowhere to hide in front of him? Furthermore, as an old player himself, he also knew the habits of players, which was to initiate a scout when they encounter NPCs they can't get a read on. This was a panel function that NPCs couldn't sense. But Chen Lun was not your average NPC, he was a player in NPC's clothing. These little tricks, he had long since seen through them. Polaris and So Qiang. It's these two, what a coincidence. Chen Lun was somewhat surprised. He knew both of these players in front of him, with So Qiang even being an old acquaintance. In his past life, So Qiang could be considered his peer and rival. Both were storyline gamers, one streaming and recording videos, the other selling guides and weaving tales. So Qiang had more than once expressed her disdain, stating Chen Lun was always distorting the storyline, concocting tall tales, being a paparazzi to female NPCs, shameless to the core. She called on her fans, especially her female fans, to boycott Chen Lun. But Chen Lun never stooped to her level, just saw her as another sheep to be sheared whenever they met, and afterwards, he would even send her a private message to thank her for advertising for him, which made his business even better. It infuriated So Qiang every time, causing her to have a fit during her live streams. As for Polaris, he was even more famous. An old hand at online games, his presence was felt in all the popular games of the past. He was known for his solitary nature and formidable strength, attracting many fans who sought him out. Polaris later joined the world's first holographic online game, Era of Mystery, and carved out a name for himself, reaching the apex of the player pyramid. Because he took the magic faction sequence path, he was revered by the players as Sorcerer King Polaris, although there was a more down-to-earth nickname Brother Polar. "I heard from Connie that you are looking to work for me," Chen Lun said. "Yes, Mr. Jack." Polaris repressed his shock at the man, replying respectfully. Chen Lun pondered. Polaris and So King exchanged glances, feeling somewhat nervous. "Having you work as servants in my manor is not out of the question." Hope dawned on both of them. "But..." Chen Lun smiled faintly. Polaris felt a tightness in his chest, thinking, could it be that he had lost the bet? Was the opportunity slipping away just like that? "I feel you would be wasted on mere servitude, you both have greater potential, I see it in you. Would you like to join my team?" Polaris and So King's eyes widened. "Jack's affection towards you has increased, currently at friendly. Jack has extended an offer of recruitment, would you like to join the Jack Manor faction?" Chen Lun toyed with the panel in secret, adjusting the affection toward both of them. After some consideration, he felt he indeed needed these two players to serve as pawns to establish his brand and spread his fame. Only if they reaped benefits from him would more people be drawn to him after the public beta. An influential gamer and a savvy broadcaster. A perfect match. Polaris, seasoning with experience, was well aware of how fortunate it was to latch onto such a benefactor during the closed beta. He sent a quick message to hurry So King and in the next second, he chose to accept. "You have accepted Jack's offer and joined the Jack Manor faction." Polaris's fingers trembled slightly. He felt as if he had returned to his teenage years, rediscovering the initial excitement and satisfaction of his early days in online gaming. So King took several deep breaths, secretly activating the recording function on her panel. The exceptionally handsome man in front of her was sure to boost her viewership. She'd record him, get some multi-angle shots, she was bound to go viral. "Oh, by the way, there's a favor I'd like to ask of you." Chen Lun acted as if he had just remembered something. "Please, do tell, Jack, my lord. What do you know about the Iron Fist gang down at the Outer City District's mudflats?" "You've triggered a level D quest, curious Jack." Task description: Jack is very curious about the Iron Fist gang, tell him what you know and you'll be rewarded based on the value of the information. You can rest assured, Mr. Jack is a generous, upright and kind gentleman, he will definitely not let you suffer. Item reward, depends on the situation. Chen Lun quietly expressed his amazement, realizing that he indeed could initiate tasks for players like an NPC. However, the difficulty of the tasks and the rewards could not exceed certain limits. These limits, indicated by his panel, are to be measured by his own strength. The rewards were either to be distributed by the panel or by himself. "I'm not stupid, letting the panel pay me is too good an opportunity to pass up," Chen Lun thought to himself. Polaris and So King didn't even think twice before accepting the task. This was an opportunity to make an impression in front of a key figure, they had to seize it. "Lord Jack, my friends have told me." Polaris conveyed the information the horseman had shared with him earlier, and while doing so, he sent a message to the horseman. "Brother Horseman, I'm very interested in what you said, can you share more details? I need to prepare." The horseman replied promptly, with a hearty and covertly luring tone, detailing the current situation of the Iron Fist gang beneath the water platforms for Polaris. He even divulged what color underwear the low-ranking members of the Iron Fist gang were wearing, sparing no detail for Polaris. Read the latest on Empire. The horseman probably only thought to deceive Polaris and So King into going there, serving as free labor to show off in front of Mr. Dolly. He had no idea that Polaris would translate and relay this information to Chen Lun. "Very good, it seems you know a lot." Chen Lun looked deeply at Polaris. From the seamless nature of his narration, Chen Lun deduced that Polaris was communicating with someone on the fly. He hadn't expected that the one occupying the Iron Fist gang would be the glutton Dolly. If he really was Vigri, then there would be even more suspicions about him. Moreover, it seemed that other players had come to Amber City and joined the current Iron Fist gang. Perhaps these two players could be used as spies for real-time communication. Chen Lun thought to himself. After such a long search, he had finally found traces of Dolly, and it was time to take action. Your information has pleased Jack, completing D-level quest, Curious Jack. Received quest rewards, 500 experience points, 20 silver ducats, and an increase in affection from Jack. Polaris and So King were overjoyed. But the surprises were far from over. They just saw the young man with black hair flip his hand and slap two oddly shaped weapons onto the table. Clap. Wrath homemade firearm. Item description: a flintlock gun intricately crafted by a genius artisan, extremely stable and powerful. The expanded barrel can deliver immense damage at close range and is not restricted by ammunition types. A handful of small steel balls sprayed at you will make you cry with pain. Good stuff. Polaris took a deep breath, eyes glued to the weapons on the table. Since you've joined my command, I won't treat you harshly. This is a very precious weapon. Back in the day, Chen Lun picked up the blunderbuss, gently caressing it. His demeanor was extremely careful, as if he was afraid of dirtying or damaging it. He suddenly remembered that boastful bard and had a flash of inspiration. Back in the day, I used it to shoot down a flying dragon. These two guns have been great companions of mine. Chen Lun showed a hint of reluctance, slowly handing the two guns over to Polaris and So King. I'm lending them to you for now. If you perform well in the future, they might be gifted to you as a reward. Yes, Lord Jack. We will definitely work hard to show our worth. Polaris suppressed his excitement and solemnly received the blunderbuss. So King was also secretly amazed, carefully tucking the blunderbuss away, verified the recording was still ongoing, her excitement barely concealed. This man actually killed a flying dragon. I will edit this first-hand material with all my skills, making it the opening shot to promote my video series. And it wasn't over yet. The young man with black hair then took two more items out of his pocket. Chapter 75. Exchange. Both of them chose to open it without discussing. At the same time, the two items on the table also displayed their respective descriptive entries. D-Class Mysterious Object Surging Badge. Item description: a badge imbued with the power of flesh that, once worn, grants surging strength and vitality. It seems to be a remnant of a church priest who, after being murdered, had his mystical substance and supernatural characteristics solidify into this badge. Eat, eat more, you are the starving butcher, you are the embodiment of strength. Item effect: wearing it grants +2 strength, +2 endurance. Item cost: increases hunger, increases food consumption. Supernatural items. Mysterious objects. Desire surged in Polaris's heart, knowing that owning this small badge could significantly enhance his strength. Equipment that directly adds +4 points to attributes is a rare find. And besides, the murdered church priest mentioned in the item description, wouldn't it be the Red Apple church priest he killed in Emerald Town? Chen Lun's image was refreshed once again in Polaris's mind. Even more powerful and unfathomable. Although King found the equipment to be formidable, she didn't crave it as much as Polaris. Instead, she focused on the price of the equipment, her gaze intensifying. Exchange price: 100 contribution points plus 60 gold pounds and low sequence mysterious substance 2. This expensive? King was startled. She understood contribution value in gold pounds. One represented contributions to a faction, like completing tasks, and the other was the largest denomination of currency in this world. As for low sequence mysterious substance, she was not very familiar with it, but it seemed complex, likely a very precious material. She had none of these items. Polaris, seeing the price, couldn't help but internally wail. How could he afford this at his current stage? Was this not just to tantalize him? The two turned their attention to another item, a piece of paper filled with text, its torn edges jagged as if ripped hastily from a notebook. Supernatural Knowledge Destiny Faction Sequence 9, Hidden Pathway. Item description: a sheet containing supernatural knowledge, imbued with the path to Destiny Faction, and once read, one can acquire the main occupation Sequence 9 Beast Tamer. Only mystery can combat mystery, only the transcendent can conquer the transcendent. The breath of Polaris and King hitched. Their hearts beat uncontrollably fast, as if they were about to burst from their chests the next second. Supernatural knowledge. Hidden sequence. I must get my hands on it. This time, the thought emerged in both of their minds. Chen Lun, sensing their rapid breathing, sneered silently. The big pie he set out had hooked them. It was the supernatural knowledge he had transcribed using his only piece of low-sequence Destiny Faction mysterious substance. Exchange price: 500 contribution points plus 500 gold pounds and low sequence mysterious substance 5. The exorbitant price made both Polaris and King shudder. But they did not give up because of it. This was a hidden sequence openly priced and placed in the shop. Unlike the main profession pathways of the 7 true gods, even though the game officials did not explicitly say so, any somewhat experienced player knew that hidden professions might not always surpass regular ones, but they definitely had unique advantages. Moreover, labels like rare, special, and high difficulty strongly attracted loners like Polaris. Without relying on luck externally or toiling within official supernatural organizations, completing a series of difficult tasks, this was something you could get your hands on just by gathering the necessary exchange conditions. The way Polaris and King looked at the black-haired youth changed. This is our secret, we must cling tightly to this thigh, and not let the information out. Polaris sent a message. King pondered for a moment and nodded. I know, when the public test comes, we will rely on this opportunity to take off. By then, I will edit the material, so other players won't know that supernatural knowledge and mysterious objects can be obtained here. Chen Lun watched them fall silent, knowing they were communicating. Faced with such a big opportunity, he would definitely hold on to it tightly, keep it to himself, and not tell anyone. But unfortunately, this was not something that could be hidden. I still need you to advertise for me a lot more. Chen Lun thought silently. He opened the game's built-in forum. This was a feature that appeared after the start of the beta test. Chen Lun had tried it before and could only browse like a visitor, not being able to post, forced to be a permanent lurker. Whether it was a bug caused by crossing over or some other reason, he wasn't sure. By now, the forum already had many posts, enthusiastic discussions from players across the Sun continent. But so far, no player had posted anything about becoming a transcendent. Chen Lun casually glanced at a few posts and then closed the forum. This forum would surely have posts about him in the future. Even if Polaris and So King did not actively advertise, they would become involuntary billboards for him among the player community. The next day at noon, Chen Lun was about to head out in a carriage. He just happened to run into Polaris and So King, who had just come online to find him. I still have to go to work, look for me in the evening if you need something. Chen Lun lifted the curtain and said casually. Polaris and So King stood there, watching the carriage leave. After a while. So even big shots have to wake up early for work? Is it that competitive? Polaris remarked. So King rolled her eyes and asked softly. What do we do now? What else can we do? Just stroll around nearby for a bit. Time is precious, maybe we will trigger some quest. After Polaris finished speaking, he headed straight outside the manor. So King pouted and then followed. Chen Lun sat in the carriage, planning to visit Pompey Manor later to ask for a leave from the Viscount. He wasn't going to teach Rebecca that day and was preparing to take a trip to the Shallows. Having found out about Dolly's whereabouts, he decided to take the initiative. The carriage stopped in front of the manor. Chen Lun got off and walked in. But when he arrived at the Viscount's villa, he found something odd. Good morning, Mr. Jack. Rebecca, sitting in her wheelchair, gave him a smile. Good morning, Miss Rebecca. Chen Lun replied. Rebecca kept smiling and nodded, but said no more. Chen Lun frowned secretly, feeling that Rebecca was a bit off today. Mr. Jack, the Viscount and his wife are having breakfast, please wait a moment. Butler Binos approached and bowed as he spoke. Chen Lun nodded. Shortly after, Viscount Pompey and Lady Pompey came out. Rebecca is in a bit of a bad mood today, please don't take it to heart. Viscount Pompey said. Of course not, Viscount. Chen Lun replied, eyeing the Viscount and his wife for a bit before suddenly donning a polite yet eerie smile. Why would I take offense with a dead person? Binos' face changed color. Viscount Pompey and his wife were slightly taken aback. Suddenly, Chen Lun whirled around, the back of his hand slashing, ripping through the upper half of Rebecca's body. Bear strike! Boom! Blood spurted like paint, and fear was frozen on Rebecca's face. Chapter 76. Binos bellowed hoarsely. Chen Lun ignored him, stepping forward and swinging his hand. The dark, sharp fingers sliced across Viscount Pompey and Lady Pompey's throats. Ugh! The Pompey couple's eyes widened as they clutched their throats and fell to the ground with a thud, blood pooling around them. Ah, ah! Binos fell to his knees, shouting the Viscount's name. Why? Why did you kill them? He was extremely agitated, his old face flushed red, his eyes bloodthirsty, staring fixedly at Chen Lun. Chen Lun glanced at the old butler and sighed silently. Butler Binos, take another good look, they are not the Pompey family. Binos turned his head and saw that the 3 bodies on the ground had disappeared. Only 3 blank canvases lay on the ground, with oil paint scattered all around, resembling abstract paintings. Binos was stunned. Chen Lun stood quietly, glancing at the mess on the floor. Ever since Rebecca had greeted him, he had sensed that something was amiss. When the Pompey couple appeared, he finally identified the problem. This family had no heartbeat. Moreover, there was a faint, distinct smell of paint about them. What happened here before I came? Chen Lun asked. Binos' mind was blank, he took a few breaths to calm down. His lordship the Viscount received a letter this morning, and then took his wife and daughter out. Went out? Where did they go? Chen Lun continued to inquire. Binos slowly stood up, realizing the gravity of the situation. He thought for a moment, then said. His lordship the Viscount mentioned he was invited to take his family to Lord Barney's house to appreciate a painting. Lord Barney, the oil paint baron. Chen Lun roughly pieced the matter together in his mind. He asked Butler Binos for the address of Lord Barney's house, then left quickly. Lord Jack, are you going to find the Pompey family? Binos asked loudly behind him. Seeing Chen Lun stop in his tracks and turn to nod, the old butler solemnly bowed. Lord Jack, please be careful, the safety of the Viscount's family rests on you. Don't worry, I am Rebecca's teacher. Chen Lun said with a smile. I won't let my student and her parents be in danger. After saying this, he turned and walked away, under the grateful gaze of Butler Binos. In a corner of the inner city district, a painting studio. Dolly, how much longer? Baron Barney asked impatiently. Patience is the fuel for creating masterpieces, please let me embellish it a bit more. The brown-haired youth sat on a low stool, painting with his brush. In front of him, Rebecca and the Pompey couple sat together, all smiling, their postures elegant, serving as his most qualified models. But the Pompey's eyes were filled with fear, staring fixedly at the young man in front of them, their emotions incredulous. Their bodies uncontrollably fixed to the chairs, but their minds still functioning. Viscount Pompey hadn't expected that his foster son, Vigri, and his good friend Barney, would turn against his family. These 2 familiar people suddenly became strangers. I am prepared to name this painting Eternity of Blood and Love. Dolly stood up, a small knife pinched between 2 fingers. He approached Viscount Pompey, sliced open the chest of his foster father with the knife, and cut off a palm-sized piece of skin. Blood flowed out, but Viscount Pompey's face still maintained a smile, only his eyes revealing pain and anger. Oh, father, don't look at me with those eyes. I am merely preserving a legacy of fame for you. Humming a tune, Dolly then moved in front of Lady Pompey. In her terrified gaze, he plucked out a bone from her finger. Father's skin, mother's bone. Dolly ignored the nearly collapsing gazes of the Pompey couple and walked towards Rebecca. Oh, and of course, the daughter's blood. Only such materials can create a masterpiece of the ages. He revealed a slightly crazed smile, gently brushed Rebecca's lovely face, and wiped away the tears that slid down. Dear Rebecca, don't cry, it will hurt your brother's heart. Dolly gently pressed the knife against Rebecca's lips. Cold, sharp. Rebecca was inexplicably terrified, calling out in her heart for the name of that night. Mr. Jack. Please help me. Please save Rebecca and Mom and Dad. Dolly grabbed Rebecca's hand and slid the knife across her palm. Blood gushed out, and Dolly excitedly licked it. The fragrance of a virgin. He then opened his own hand, and the large mouth in his palm devoured the skin of Viscount Pompey, the bone of Lady Pompey, and Rebecca's blood. Slap! Dolly abruptly clenched his fist, showing a joyous expression, his cheeks flushed. He seemed as if he had taken a strong drug, turned to the easel, and began painting rapidly. Once the work is completed, my family will forever remain in the painting, becoming real puppets. I will turn over half of the Pompey family's fortune to the Viscount Sir Oil Paint, and the title of Viscount will fall upon my head. Dolly said while painting. What about my share? Baron Barney was puffing on a cigar, slightly taken aback. Dolly suddenly stopped painting, turned around, and appeared enlightened. Forgot to tell you, someone else took your share. Before Baron Barney could comprehend the meaning of these words, a dagger suddenly pierced through his chest. An unknown masked man had appeared behind him, poking his head out. A commoner also wanting to meddle in such affairs, He gently pushed, and Baron Barney fell face down to the ground. Baron Barney felt severe pain spreading throughout his body, as a pair of black boots came into view. What a fool! The masked man, cloaked in black, wiped the dagger clean on Baron Barney's blue shirt, sheathing it. He looked at Dolly, his blue eyes void of emotion. Viscount Sir Oilpaint told me you needed help here. Yes, but you weren't necessarily supposed to act, Crow, you were just insurance, understand? Crow turned, his cloak billowing, and vanished in the next second. The studio echoed with his voice. Whatever, just make sure my share is given to me on time. Dolly didn't turn back, continued painting, his lips curled into a cold smirk. Circus organization. After this mission is completed, perhaps Viscount Sir Oilpaint will recommend me for membership. Inner City District 3rd Street. Chen Lun walked out of a villa. On the wall next to the Great Gate, it was marked 3rd Street, number 21, Barney's. He looked back once, and in the distance, he saw a young maid slowly closing the door. Not here. Chapter 77. Horseman and his two fellow players were blending in with the ranks of the Iron Fist gang's underlings. They grouped up and took positions separately, guarding the entrance to the staircase leading to the studio. This street was rather secluded, a corner of the inner city district. Most of the shops here were empty, and the residential buildings were uninhabited. Horseman, we're really lucky. We just joined the Iron Fist gang and got a C-level mission. Doghead Gold was smoking a cigarette on the side, and afterward clicked his tongue in praise, commenting on how high the game's realism was. The feeling of smoke entering the lungs was hardly different from reality. Yet, what's more important is that the mission reward even includes supernatural knowledge. If we complete this mission, we're basically skyrocketing to heaven, stepping directly into the ranks of the Transcendents. With such speed, we can be considered the first batch of players to become Transcendents in the beta test. Horseman said with a laugh. His tone contained a hint of excitement, and then suddenly it turned serious as he said. However, we can't take it lightly. The rewards are so generous, the difficulty must be extremely high. It shouldn't be much of a problem. Mr. Dolly is very strong. With him leading the way, we can just slack off. As newbies, it's impossible for them to give us an unsolvable mission. Forget no taboo, said, arms crossed and looking relaxed. It's just a pity that Polaris and that woman were so stubborn to not come here with us. They missed such a rare opportunity. Horseman shook his head with a laugh, a hint of schadenfreude in his gesture, while Doghead Gold snorted and stomped out his cigarette. Once we become Transcendents, I'm actually looking forward to their expressions. Hey! Horseman suddenly showed a look of surprise. Doghead Gold and Forget No Taboo looked at him with puzzled expressions and asked aloud. Horseman chuckled twice and explained. Polaris sent me a message. Doghead Gold scoffed. He must be struggling to get by in the outer city district, hey? That's the problem with solo players, always overestimating themselves. I originally thought this Polaris, being an experienced player, would have some tricks up his sleeve, but that's it. You guessed right. Horseman said. I'll invite them over. That woman is a small-time streamer, let her record the process. It can serve as a promotion for both of our guilds. Polaris bro, we're currently at the end of Luan Huan Street, come over now. We're in the middle of a mission, have that female streamer with you start recording, shoot a promotional clip for us, and afterward, we'll recommend you to join the gang. Horseman sent a message. He quickly received a reply. Okay, I'll be right there, and I will have So King record the whole process. Bang! The blunderbuss shot out a burst of light, and countless steel pellets sprayed over Horseman's body. A fatal red damage indicator popped up above his head. You have been killed by player Polaris. Horseman's eyes widened in shock as he watched the man and woman, then dissolved into a beam of white light and disappeared. Bang! Another gunshot rang out. So King, looking excited, fired her blunderbuss at Doghead Gold and killed him with one shot. The last one left, Forget No Taboo, stood dumbfounded, staring at the pair. What are you doing? Doing a mission. Polaris grabbed a handful of steel pellets and stuffed them into his firearm, then aimed and pulled the trigger at him. Bang! Forget No Taboo turned into a beam of white light and followed his companions. You have killed player Forget No Taboo. Gained 1 contribution degree point. Polaris had a smile on his face. Did you get it all on tape? Yet. So King nodded vigorously. Enemies. The other members of the Iron Fist gang finally reacted, pulling out their outdated versions of Mad Hand and Raging Fire, and started pursuing the two of them. Go. We just need to lure them away. Polaris spoke and took the lead, running down an alley. So King stuck out her tongue at the Iron Fist gang's underlings, then turned to follow Polaris. Half an hour earlier, they had been found by Mr. Jack. Mr. Jack assigned them a task that required them to find their companions and kill them. In the face of the task reward, Polaris accepted without hesitation. It wasn't only about players with whom they had briefly cooperated, even long-time friends. As long as the reward was sufficient, Polaris would kill without error. Of course, if such a situation really occurred, Polaris would still compensate his friends afterwards. After all, he was a shark hand without emotions but understood the concept of sharing. Polaris. Have you gone mad? What good does killing us do for you? Horseman sent an exasperated message. Polaris glanced at it and promptly deleted the friend. Damn! Horseman cursed, standing in the backyard of the Iron Fist gang's base, with Doghead Gold and Forget No Taboo walking out of the building behind him. This was their resurrection point. Damn it! Ruining our good deeds. Wait until the public test starts, we will definitely make these two scumbags pay. Doghead Gold cursed and Forget No Taboo also had a grim face. We don't have to wait for the public test, let's go now. Horseman said in a deep voice. We can't just let this go, our task hasn't failed yet, if we rush over now, it's still not too late. The three of them, fueled by anger, quickly left the sewers and headed for the inner city district. Luckily, they had identity proofs given to them by Mr. Dolly, allowing them to enter and leave the inner city district, otherwise it would have been difficult. After Polaris and So King led away the Iron Fist gang's underlings. A carriage parked on the side of the street, its curtains lifted, and a person stepped out. It was Chen Lun. He instructed the coachman to leave first and then walk straight up the stairs, looking up at the second-floor studio wooden door. He checked his equipment, then placed 2 ink bottles at the top of the stairs, pulling out a transparent thread to secure them. Bang! He kicked open the wooden door. Whoosh! A sharp knife stabbed from behind the door. Chen Lun frowned, raised his hand and flicked his fingers. His pitch-black fingers struck the blade, emitting a clear ringing sound. As the sparks flew, a masked man in black robes appeared before him. The masked man kicked out. Chen Lun responded with a knee, his expressionless face unchanged. Rhinoceros impact. Bang! The two were evenly matched. The masked man uttered a sound of surprise and doubt, then turned his hand, another short knife appeared in his palm, slashing down fiercely. Chen Lun was quicker, turning his knee into a push. Scorpion tail needle. The knife was only half a hand's distance from his face when it came to a sudden stop and was flung away. The masked man leaped back, clutching his abdomen, staggering on his feet. He squinted his eyes. Supernatural toxin. Click, the door closed on its own. The young man who had been painting paused his movements and stood up. He glanced at the masked man, Raven, and chuckled lightly. He had been tricked by this move before, and now seeing someone else in the same plight, he couldn't help but feel a little schadenfreude. You've come, Jack. The brown-haired young man turned to look at Chen Lun, casually tossing aside the brush in his hand. I thought you wouldn't come. It seems I underestimated your courage and arrogance. The Pompies stood like statues with a smile, but their eyes were sad. Their gaze shifted to Chen Lun, changing from surprise to hope, and then from hope to concern. Rebecca's gaze was the most intense, and 2 more tears fell from her eyes. He had come. He really heard my call and came to save us. Chapter 78. Dolly sighed with regret. But killing you and continuing later is not too late. Dolly. Chen Lun looked at the brown-haired youth, thinking that his guess wasn't wrong. The adopted son of Viscount Pompey, Vigri, was indeed Dolly. How he turned into an ugly, fat man in the next 2 years was no longer important. How rare, a transcendent of the Destiny faction, yet only a sequence 9. Today, you're dead for sure. The masked man crow spoke in a cold voice. Don't act yet, I want to play with him. I must return the favor from that night. Dolly flexed his 5 fingers. The very next second, his figure flashed, and he appeared in front of Chen Lun, his palm heading straight for him. Dolly's strength and agility were well balanced. Chen Lun estimated both around 30 points, he could only compete with his strength, far behind in agility. Using Serpentine Incarnation for a surprise might allow him to dodge temporarily, but after being figured out, his situation would plummet dramatically. Bang! The dark golden scales clashed with the white exoskeleton-covered fist, creating an explosive sound. A twitch appeared in the corner of Dolly's eye. It's that tough hide again. He opened his mouth wide, the corners splitting towards his ears. Then Dolly's head zoomed in fast, completing a biting motion with incredible speed. Crack! Dolly bit through Chen Lun's hair, his constantly wriggling teeth grinding together like gears, emitting a grating noise. His eyes swiveled, catching sight of Chen Lun's neck bent at an odd angle, dodging the strike. Like a snake, wriggling like a disgusting earthworm. Dolly's face, twisted into a ghastly expression, spoke in a strange voice, filled with disdain. Gurgle. No sooner had he spoken than Chen Lun's left arm became serpentine, coiling upwards, trapping Dolly's right arm, locking it in place. The following second, Chen Lun's right fist struck deep into Dolly's left chest. Bang! Dolly couldn't dodge and took the punch head-on. The impact of rhinoceros impact penetrated the protective membrane over his sternum, piercing straight through his heart. Cough! Dolly spat out a mouthful of blood. Taking a deep breath, his face twisted even more ferociously. A good punch, I like it a lot. Chen Lun's eyes narrowed slightly. Transcendents of the flesh faction were indeed troublesome to deal with such tenacious life force. Not to mention he was a sequence higher than him. A soft click. He drew his repeater flintlock gun, pressing it against Dolly's chest and pulling the trigger. Bang! Bang bang bang! With a pained cry, Dolly took the first hit, then forcibly broke free from Chen Lun's hold. He dodged the following shots, deflecting stray bullets with his hand. You should be dead. Dolly growled and bit off his own thumb, chewing and swallowing it in his mouth. Blood flowed profusely from his hand, but he was unfazed. Instantly, his veins bulged, his eyes turned blood red, and he lunged forward again, his fingerless hand becoming like a flesh-slicing knife, his other hand's large mouth extending a long tongue. Every move he made was accompanied by waves of air pressure. Strength and agility clearly surged. Whoosh! Chen Lun used Serpentine Incarnation to twist his body but didn't fully evade the blade palm, and a gash appeared on his face. As he tried to retreat, his leg was entangled by the long tongue emerging from Dolly's palm. In the next moment, Dolly's kick came hurtling. Bang! Chen Lun was sent flying, crashing into the wall and creating a dent, with cracks spreading like a spider web. The grotesque paintings hanging on the wall crashed to the floor in a cacophony of cracks and snaps. Chen Lun slid down the wall, staggering to his feet. Blood seeped from the corner of his mouth, but fortunately, the protection from the carp armor spared him from losing a significant chunk of his life. Such disgusting defensive power! Dolly clenched his fists, letting out a raspy, cold laugh. Crow, let's join forces. I don't want to waste any more time. It's about time. Tough and fleshy opponents are my favorite, het. The masked man said. A sense of crisis surged in Chen Lun's heart. Facing Dolly one-on-one, he had always kept an eye on the masked man nearby, holding back in order to prevent a surprise attack, and therefore only utilizing 70 to 80% of his strength. Handling Dolly was already challenging enough, and now with the addition of another transcendent, he feared he might fall into a significant disadvantage. 2 against 1, no honor in combat. Dolly attacked once again. As he moved, his body swelled like inflating to the size of a small giant, almost reaching the ceiling. His palm transformed into a serrated meat cleaver, swooping down in a vertical chop. Whoosh! In such a form, Dolly's strength must have soared to over 40 points, nearing 50. This was the threshold for a low-sequence transcendence attributes, and Chen Lun was unwilling to confront it head-on. He dodged to one side, avoiding Dolly's attack. But in the next moment, a sharp dagger appeared in front of him. Whoosh! With space being encroached upon, Chen Lun had no choice but to raise his hand to protect his throat, his whole body now covered by the carp armor. Hiss! The blade scraped across the scales, producing a startling shower of sparks. Chen Lun took the opportunity to wrap his serpentine arm around the masked man's hand and, leveraging his position, burst out from his side to escape the encirclement. But it seemed that his opponent had already anticipated his intentions. The masked man let out a cold laugh and struck back with his hand. Extending a finger, it pierced Chen Lun's back like an iron drill, the tough dark gold scales shattering under its force. With a flick of that finger, a large chunk of flesh was ripped from Chen Lun's back. Chen Lun grunted, rolling forward to increase the distance. Hidden path, conspiracy faction sequence 8 locksmith. He muttered under his breath. This was an advanced sequence of sequence 9 thief, possessing the supernatural ability to unlock, and specializing in agility and assassination. This is bad. I'm completely outpaced. Chen Lun knelt on the ground, his back throbbing with searing pain as blood surged out, soaking through his shirt. His back turned to the Pompies, the grisly wound was a sight that quickened their heartbeats. On seeing it, the three of them couldn't help but feel their hearts race. Viscount Pompey had not expected that it wasn't just his closest foster son Vigri who was a transcendent with mysterious powers but also Rebecca's home tutor, Mr. Jack. However, Mr. Jack seemed to be at a disadvantage at the moment. Viscount Pompey wanted to speak, but felt helpless to intervene. Viscount Pompey closed his eyes, simply hoping Mr. Jack wouldn't lose his life over this. Mrs. Pompey and Rebecca's eyes showed their anxiousness, especially Rebecca. She desperately wished Mr. Jack would quickly knock that ingrate Vigri to the ground. Mr. Jack, please be safe. You can do it, Mr. Jack. Dolly and Crow, big and small, turned to look at the black-haired youth kneeling on the ground. There's no point in struggling, Jack. Dolly said in a deep voice. As he spoke, Crow had already slashed through the air like a phantom, appearing in front of Chen Lun. A knife stroke to the head. With the unlock feature embedded in this stroke, Crow's deep blue eyes flashed with cruelty, as if he'd already seen the dagger act as a key, slicing through Chen Lun's shell-like defenses and cutting him in two. Danger. Panel. Chen Lun thought coolly. With a flick of his finger, he allocated all 17 remaining points to agility. Current attributes, agility 38. Chapter 79. The dagger flew like lightning, cutting Chen Lun in half. But the crow's smiling eyes faltered, because he felt he hadn't cut through anything solid, just slashed through the air. Be careful. Dolly warned, rushing in right after. Chen Lun's speed had nearly doubled, dodging the crow's attack and already reaching his back. Hands braced against the ground, he kicked at the crow's lower back. Scorpion tail needle. Thud. The crow screamed in agony, his body flying forward like a cannonball. Midair, he coughed out black, contaminated blood, soaking his mask. With a fierce look in his eyes, just before crashing into the wall, his hands burst into a bright pattern. The anticipated loud crash did not occur. Instead, the crow passed through the wall like a ghost, vanishing from sight. Whoosh! The next instant, he traversed space, appearing from beneath Chen Lun's feet. The dagger aimed to sever Chen Lun's entire leg. But this strike also missed. His speed has increased. The crow burst from the ground, his throat erupting with frustrated words. Chen Lun's figure drew a black Z in the room, bursting through the door with a bang and rushing out. He's trying to escape. The crow shouted coldly. Immediately, he flung his black robe, his body flying out like a dark bird, with the hem fluttering behind him as he pursued. Watch out for your tricks. Dolly warned in a deep voice, following him out. The crow, just having charged out of the room, caught a glimpse of Chen Lun's figure flash past the stairwell below. He pursued with a determined face, completely overlooking a clear thread on the ground. Twang! The thread was tripped by his boot, pulling loose the cap it was connected to. Extreme danger surged in the crow's heart. Glancing over, he noticed 2 black ink bottles at the corner of the stairwell entrance. He wished to use locksmith to escape through the floor beneath his feet, but suddenly, a whistle sounded. Swoosh! His mind grew hazy, stunned for a moment. The next moment, the ink bottles erupted in blinding light. No! Boom! A deafening explosion rang out, with light and smoke diffusing far and wide. Countless tiny metal shrapnel tore through the air and smoke, piercing the crow's body and shredding everything in close proximity. Fuck! Polaris, who had been watching the scene while hiding, couldn't help but curse. Behind him, So King rolled her eyes, then quickly her expression turned to one of excitement. The camera was still rolling, capturing all the combat action. Bricks and rubble scattered by the shockwave, Dolly, who had been about to step out of the room, was forced to retreat back inside. With a dark expression, he dusted off his clothes and gritted his teeth. How can there be such a stupid person? You have killed a member of the circus organization, Crow Locksmith of Sequence 8, Conspiracy Faction, and gained 3,000 experience points. Standing at the stairwell, Chen Lun's mouth curled slightly. The shell necklace on his chest dimmed after a brief glow. The bomb that Connie meticulously crafted was truly useful. After absorbing the mechanical knowledge contained in the prototype drawings of Mad Hand, she created the weapons as per Chen Lun's request. They were powerful, quick to activate and camouflaged. Chen Lun named these special bombs red ink, symbolizing using the enemy's blood as the ink to write their dismal endings. But due to the complex production process, they could only be handcrafted by Connie for now, and the only 2 available were used here. Additionally, they were expensive to make. 1 bottle of red ink cost 5 gold pounds, which made Chen Lun somewhat reluctant to use them. Looks like the crow has turned into spicy bird dings, scattered all around, unlikely to be separated out into mysterious objects. Chen Lun surveyed the surrounding smoke and privately lamented. Jack. The smoke was dispelled, and a disproportionately muscular little giant leaped down the stairwell. Dolly's face, bulging with veins and eyes bloodshot, was fixated on Chen Lun. He slammed his fist down, the back of it covered in haphazard teeth like a meaty meteor hammer. Boom! Dolly's hammer strike, like a small explosive, created a crater in the ground. Chen Lun's agility was already above his, and being outside with more space to maneuver made avoiding his attacks all the easier. Chen Lun moved aside, revealing dark golden scales covering his exposed skin. He looked at Dolly with a pair of emerald vertical pupils. If you have any aces up your sleeve, you'd better use them now, or you will die. He said coolly. Dolly sneered back, offering no response. With a stomp, his massive body bore down across the space. The dark-haired young man pulled out a small hand crossbow and aimed it at him, pulling the trigger. Thunk! A red flash cut through the air, incredibly fast. Dolly's heart skipped a beat, barely having time to raise his hand to protect his head. A red crossbow arrow pierced his sturdy arm. Ugh! The intense pain, along with a surging hunger, tormented Dolly. The crossbow arrow dissipated with the wind, vanishing without a trace, but the flesh at the wound was as if gnawed away by an invisible maw, its whereabouts unknown. The hideous wound was a ghastly sight to behold. To handle a beefy bull like this, I still have to rely on it. Thinking so, Chen Lun raised his hand and loosed 2 more arrows. The tongue of gluttony spat out, the bowstring trembled. Swish swish! Dolly's body was large and an easy target. 2 crossbow arrows, one on the left and one on the right, plunged into his thighs. Boom! The flesh on Dolly's thighs was devoured by an invisible mouth. Without the support of his muscles, his massive body knelt on the spot. He gritted his teeth against the pain and hunger, realizing that if this continued, he was in danger of dying. You're forcing my hand. Jack! Dolly said through clenched teeth. He flipped his hand, and a scroll flew from his body. Whoosh! The scroll unfurled to reveal a tightly closed large eye in the center, surrounded by spiraling oil paints. If one looked closely, they could see that the eyelashes of this eye were all curved fingers, attached around the eye, gently twisting. Utterly eerie. The eyelid of the large eye lifted slightly, revealing a small part of the pupil underneath. The red, yellow, and blue oil paints were distinct and profound, as if hiding some dreadful power. After a glance, Chen Lun felt a chill down his spine, a strong sense of crisis washing over him. I can't let it open. He put away the hand crossbow and switched to the blunderbuss. He charged forward, raising the gun and firing at the scroll in mid-air. Bang! A barrage of steel pellets struck the scroll, causing it to shudder violently, but it wasn't truly damaged. Pupil in painting continued lifting its eyelid slowly. Seeing this, Chen Lun immediately switched to his great weapon, the Connie No. 1 mechanical glove. He fine-tuned his fingers, power at full blast. Bang! A half-meter diameter fireball shot out, slamming into the scroll. The high temperature, accompanied by rolling black smoke, engulfed the scroll. The flames turned the scroll to ashes, only the pattern of the eye in the middle was still struggling to hold on. The eyelid trembled slightly, seeming to be affected. Effective. Chen Lun was inwardly elated. Die! With all the strength in his good arm, Dolly pushed forcefully, propelling his entire body towards Chen Lun by the reaction. The scroll gifted by Jazz Painter was his last card, he couldn't let it be interrupted. Just a little more time, and once pupil in painting was fully opened, the tide of battle would be definitively turned. Bang! Upon their fists colliding, Chen Lun felt his entire arm go numb, the massive force seemed almost enough to shatter him. Fresh blood spilled from the corners of Chen Lun's mouth, he persisted with gritted teeth, his mechanical glove gripping tightly onto Dolly's fist. Next moment, it burst into flame, spewing forth from his palm. Dolly tried to get away, but Chen Lun held fast, the fire clinging to Dolly, causing his upper body to be continuously scorched. Ah ah ah! Dolly turned into a man of fire, struggling and wailing. Chen Lun glanced at the scroll in mid-air, the eye was already half open, with tears of blood putting out the flames on the scroll. Not good. Chen Lun knew time was of the essence, he must quickly eliminate Dolly, who was in his way, and then stop that eye. Both hands lashed out like two great snakes, biting into the sides of Dolly's waist. Snake's kiss. Supernatural toxin injected, rendering Dolly even weaker. Chen Lun immediately transformed his fingers to fists. Rhinoceros impact. Bear strike. Then, elbows, palms, knees, and kicks followed in rapid succession. A series of moves too fast for the naked eye to see struck Dolly, emitting a series of muffled thuds. Dolly stood rigid, staggered on the spot like a drunk man. Chen Lun's eyes hardened. Die. His fingers came together, staining black. Swoosh. Stork peck. His entire hand plunged into Dolly's left chest, hot blood flowing down his arm. Then, scorpion tail needle. Chen Lun's fingertips pierced the heart, injecting supernatural toxin again. The finishing blow. Chapter 80. His huge body shrank, becoming loose and slack, his muscles and bones all destroyed by dense strikes. His bulging veins darkened, the supernatural toxin had spread throughout his body, death was certain. A few seconds later. Killing Oil Paint Baron's assistant Vigri, Dolly, Sequence 8 Gourmet, Flesh Faction, gained 3,500 experience points. A prompt popped up, but before Chen Lun could catch his breath, the pupil in painting had almost fully opened. Boom! He only had time to throw out one last fireball. Through the heat-distorted air, from inside the flame, he could see that the eye was fully open. The pupil's primary colors spun, and Chen Lun felt as if his heart had been struck hard. Thump! Chen Lun staggered backward 2 steps, blood spilling from his mouth and nose. You have suffered a bewitch heart mental shock, sanity 2, life points 100. The pupil in painting gurgled as it rotated its pupil, and after giving him a glance, it seemed to lack the strength to continue the attack. Immediately, the eyelashes' countless fingers stretched out from the damaged, charred painting, dragging Dolly's body into the scroll. Then, the scroll burned to ash in the flames, disintegrating with the wind. Puppet Master Baron Barney and Vigri, Dolly, are dead, completed Grade C mission, Clouds Gathering. Received mission rewards, 1500 experience points 2 gold pounds, Pompey's Affection and Low Sequence Flesh Faction Mystic Book 1. Whew! Chen Lun stood in place, letting out a breath of relief. Continuous high-intensity combat had drained a lot of his physical strength, and his injuries were not light, his life points were nearly depleted. That last look from the pupil in painting almost killed him instantly. That's Constellation Faction Sequence 7 Heart Thief's ability, a mid-sequence transcendent. His heart sank. Now that Dolly had been killed by him, but he didn't get the anticipated mysterious substance from the high-sequence Flesh Faction, because his body was dragged away by the pupil in painting. The Oil Paint Baron behind Dolly is most likely a mid-sequence transcendent, and that mysterious substance from the high-sequence Flesh Faction is very likely to be in his hands. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense how Dolly in his former life came to possess this mysterious substance. Oil Paint Baron. Through his encounters over this period, those oil paintings imbued with supernormal powers, they must have come from this Oil Paint Baron. An unknown path of a mid-sequence transcendent, hey! Chen Lun immediately felt an immense pressure. Being a level higher was manageable, but a whole tier higher was a bit far-fetched. To advance from Sequence 8 to Sequence 7 meant entering the level of mid-sequence transcendence, and a qualitative change in overall strength occurred. Many weaknesses ordinary mortals had were no longer weaknesses, and they were also difficult to kill by ordinary means. And from the current clues, the abilities the Oil Paint Baron had revealed included Moon Faction Sequence 9 Medium and Constellation Faction Sequence 7 Heart Thief. It's unknown if he still has any other abilities hidden, nor what specific sequence path he possesses. Better wrap up the current situation first. Chen Lun sighed internally. He walked toward the stairs, intending to go to the studio to rescue Pompey's family. Suddenly, he stopped, spotting a flash of light where Dolly's body had been. Hey! He quickly went to the spot of the light, bent down, and picked up a small pendant with a black skull. Token Society Pendant. Item description: it appears to be a token of a secret society. Presenting it can prove one's membership and successfully participate in society activities. The pendant's designer seems to have a fondness for the deceased, hence they used it as a symbol. Some trinket, don't know what bird use it's good for yet. Chen Lun casually put it in his pocket and turned to go upstairs. Just then, a burst of footsteps came, followed by a man's loud shout. Polaris! Our mission has failed. You this bloody, The horsemen 3 players seemed as if a stasis spell had been cast on them, freezing in place. They saw Polaris and So King hiding in the corner, turning their heads to look at the 3 of them with strange expressions on their faces. They also saw a dozen members of the Iron Fist gang gathered around, staring at them in admiration. One of the guys even gave them a thumbs up, seemingly in praise. Lastly, they saw a black-haired young man leaning against the railing on the stairway, looking down at them expressionlessly. The area was a mess, like a parking lot that had been hit by a tornado. Doghead Gold secretly cast Scout and, shivering all over, hesitantly sent the information to his 2 companions. The other 2, upon seeing it, shuddered as well. I knew this task wasn't going to be that simple. Bang bang bang! 3 gunshots rang out, and the 3 horsemen once again transformed into white light and disappeared. The Iron Fist gang's members didn't seem surprised by the scene. Kill players horsemen, Doghead Gold, and forget no taboo. Earn 300 experience points and 1 attribute point. Chen Lun raised an eyebrow. So the rewards for killing players were this generous. His gaze shifted to Polaris and So King, and both of them, startled, quickly receded back like groundhogs, vanishing by the wall. Forget it. I'll try again during the public test when there are more people. Chen Lun muttered to himself and put away his flintlock gun. He continued upstairs. Polaris and So King were panting heavily, having just about believed they were about to be casually killed by Mr. Jack. That indifferent look, the ease of his actions, was exactly the style of a classic major villain. Task completed. Did you get the prompt? So King asked. Got it. We're one step closer to that hidden pathway to supernatural knowledge. Polaris took a deep breath. So King, reviewing the video playback, picked a few exciting clips to show Polaris. Hey, don't you think Jack is quite handsome? She elbowed Polaris, giggling twice. Polaris looked at her with a strange gaze, as if viewing an obsessed fan. Yeah, he's all right. He said casually. So King rolled her eyes and closed the panel, disappointed. You don't know anything. Wait till I edit the video. When I post it, this NPC is definitely going to attract a lot of female fans. Just don't reveal any secrets about him. I know. Annoying. Chen Lun reached the 2nd floor. The stairwell entrance had been blasted open by red ink, with fragments of the protective walls exposing bricks and steel reinforcement inside. As expected, it was blown to pieces. Chen Lun found remains of a crow among the debris scattered on the floor. 3 pieces of low-sequence conspiracy faction mysterious substance. Although it was regrettable that he couldn't obtain a complete mysterious object, these spoils were not bad. He stored the mysterious substances in his panel and entered the studio. Mr. Jack. Rebecca looked at the door with a surprised face, and then her look turned to one of urgency. Please, save my father and mother. Chapter 81. Chen Lun approached. No matter how much I call them, they won't wake up, sob. Rebecca sobbed, kneeling on the ground. Chen Lun found that the Pompey family had already broken free from control, but at the moment, the Pompey couple lay on the ground, motionless. He went up to check and found that their wounds were very deep, seeming to have reached the arteries, and due to excessive blood loss, had fallen into a coma. Their faces were now pale, their breathing faint, looking as if they were at death's door. Rebecca knelt beside her parents, appearing very helpless. Don't worry, Rebecca, Viscount Pompey and the lady will be all right. Chen Lun comforted her. Fortunately, the wound on Rebecca's palm wasn't deep, and she was not in any serious trouble now. She nodded, seemingly trusting Chen Lun a lot. After reflecting for a moment, Chen Lun immediately took out 2 portions of the low-sequence flesh faction mysterious substance from the panel, and stuffed the 2 blood-red meatballs into the mouths of the Viscount couple. The mysterious substance of the flesh faction contained an exceptionally strong life force, distinct from the nectar of the Red Apple Church. This mysterious substance was much purer and more advanced, the two were not even in the same league. It had no side effects and could even prolong life. Healing the blood loss symptoms of two ordinary people, it was more than enough. However, using it so bluntly was a bit wasteful, like using rocket fuel to cook rice over a fire. But Chen Lun had no better option at the moment. He could only use it for the emergency, saving lives was crucial. After swallowing the mysterious substance, the Pompies' faces quickly regained color, and their weakened state visibly improved at a noticeable rate. The wounds on their bodies began to heal, and even the severed finger of Mrs. Pompey miraculously grew back. Seeing this scene, Rebecca was overjoyed, her gaze towards Chen Lun even more intimate and worshipful. Rebecca's affection has increased. It is currently reverent. Chen Lun raised an eyebrow. He hadn't expected that Rebecca's affection for him had already grown so high. Affection levels, from low to high, are mortal enemies: hatred, hostility, disgust, indifference, neutral, friendly, close, respected, reverent, and worship. Generally speaking, the initial affection level is indifferent. In less than a month, he had already raised Rebecca's affection to reverence. If Era of Mystery was a dating sim, he would probably be at the final stage of getting what you want. As Viscount Pompey and his wife slowly came to, they were first confused and then gradually calmed down. When they realized they were in a safe state and their injuries were healed, they began to inquire. Rebecca excitedly told her parents how Chen Lun had fought valiantly to defeat the villains and used miraculous methods to bring them back to life. "I can't thank you enough, Mr. Jack, you've saved our family once again." Viscount Pompey stood up and gave Chen Lun a heartfelt salute. Viscount Pompey's affection has increased. It is currently respected. Next to him, Mrs. Pompey also showed her gratitude and curtsied to him. The notification of the increase in affection came once more, like the Viscount, reaching respected. Chen Lun raised his hand to stop the Viscount from continuing his thanks. "Your Excellency the Viscount, we should leave this place first." "You're right." Viscount Pompey nodded, taking his wife and daughter, and followed Chen Lun out of the studio. Back at Pompey Manor, the Viscount's family was still shaken, feeling as if the day's events had been a nightmare. Viscount Pompey graciously hosted Chen Lun for a meal, with many words of thanks. The Viscount became slightly intoxicated after several bouts of toasting. He began to sigh and express regret at his lack of judgment, not only failing to discern the insidiousness of his old friend Barney but also not suspecting his adopted son Vigri of harboring intentions to harm them. When it came to the mystic realm, he suddenly fell silent. After the dinner, the Viscount soothed his wife and daughter, then asked Chen Lun to stay behind. "Mr. Jack, please stay a moment, I have something to show you," Viscount Pompey said earnestly. Chen Lun nodded. He noticed Rebecca sitting in a wheelchair, being pushed away by Lady Pompey. She turned her head to look at Chen Lun and revealed a grateful smile. Chen Lun took off his top hat and placed a hand over his chest in response. Immediately after, Viscount Pompey led Chen Lun up the wooden staircase of the villa, heading upward. "I really can't thank you enough, Mr. Jack." Binos followed beside Chen Lun, whispering. "It was nothing, Butler Binos." Chen Lun waved his hand dismissively. But respect was even more evident on Binos' face. "You truly are a noble person. Binos' affection for you has increased. It is currently at adoration." Chen Lun raised an eyebrow. "Does this mean I've gained full access to Pompey Manor?" Viscount Pompey took Chen Lun to the art gallery, then lightly twisted the sword scabbard on a suit of knight's armor to the left. Click click. Chen Lun watched in surprise as the wall beside it slowly moved, revealing a small side door. "Forgive the crudeness, Mr. Jack, but what lies beyond here is my true collection," Viscount Pompey said. He extended a hand, gesturing for Chen Lun to go inside. When Chen Lun entered the hidden door, he found the space inside wasn't large, but every item on the shelves was exquisitely beautiful and supreme. Jewelry, gems, and even weapons of all varieties were laid out in abundance. They shone brilliantly under the dim light. "No wonder the small animals I dispatched found nothing here." Chen Lun suddenly noticed a deer head mounted on the wall, its eyes turned to meet Chen Lun's gaze for a moment. Grade C mysterious object wall-mounted deer head. Item description: a mystical specimen containing powers of nature, outwardly a deer head, identical to its appearance in life. It is suspected to be a remnant of a supernatural creature that, even in death, was protecting someone it wished to protect. Item effect, provides detection and protection, able to isolate malicious gazes and hide objects desired to be protected. When an intruder is detected, it will emit a warning and release a deadly poison gas to kill the enemy. Item cost, ensure the continuation of the Pompey bloodline, otherwise suffer a curse. Chen Lun shifted his gaze away slowly. It seems the Pompey family is not as simple as it appears. He mused silently. Mr. Jack, please feel free to choose any item from my collection. Viscount Pompey said. Chen Lun glanced at the Viscount, realizing that he must understand the supernatural objects here were of great use to him. Only such priceless mystical items could be worthy of his enormous gratitude. Perhaps this was an opportunity that only presented itself after a certain level of affection was reached. Chen Lun passed by row upon row of exhibits, seemingly indifferent to the treasures worth a fortune. His attention was suddenly captivated by a drop-shaped sapphire earring. Stepping forward, he gently picked it up and received a prompt. Grade C mysterious object Maggie's tear. Item description, an earring containing natural powers, shaped like a drop of sapphire. It seems to be the crystallized tear of a supernatural creature. If I see you, years since we've met, so near yet so far, both real and surreal. How should I greet you then? Only with tears, only with silence. Maggie. Item effect, can block most mental attacks, mystical contamination and divination probes, and can enhance sanity recovery speed. Increases charm by +5 when worn. Item cost, after triggering protection, emotions become hypersensitive for 12 hours. Chapter 82. Chen Lun silently muttered the name. He had some recollection of it, it seemed to appear in Philip's diary, likely the person Philip loved. But what he hadn't expected was that Maggie could be a supernatural creature. Upon further reflection, he realized that this was just Philip's taste and he came to terms with it. He picked up the sapphire earrings and signaled to Viscount Pompey. The latter bowed slightly, touching his chest in agreement. Then, Chen Lun looked around the collection room again, scanning each item. His mood gradually turned joyful and expectant. Perhaps Viscount Pompey actually obtained Philip's legacy? Otherwise, how could an ordinary person possess so many objects from the mystic realm? He thought to himself. Looking up, on the top of a cabinet, a rolled-up whip rested quietly. Chen Lun tiptoed to take it down, noting a flash of nostalgia on Viscount Pompey's face. Chen Lun forcibly controlled himself not to think too much, focusing on the whip in his hands. Supernatural item Philip's whip. Item description, a painstakingly customized whip for a transcendent, used to lash and motivate oneself to keep advancing on the supernatural path. Of course, it was occasionally used for entertainment. Hey! Buddy, you are really lucky. With this, guaranteed your path to becoming stronger won't be dull. Don't thank me too much, I am just a pioneer exploring the way forward for you. Item effect, enhances a designated Sequence 9 Beast Tamer skill, limited to 1. Chen Lun remained silent. He sneakily glanced at Viscount Pompey and noticed the nostalgia had turned into embarrassment, which soon turned into encouragement. What exactly do you mean by that expression, your Viscountship? Chen Lun couldn't help but silently complain. I am just doing this to become stronger, just to become stronger, stronger. He silently reminded himself, pretending nothing had happened as he accepted the whip. After checking the collection room one last time, Chen Lun found the final item that could be of help to him. D-grade mysterious object when the grape matures. Item description, a token of engagement received by a transcendent, seemingly transformed from a casually picked supernatural fruit, appearing as a ring set with a sapphire. It contained longing. We will meet again, won't we? Maggie. Still on that prairie, by that lake, under that grapevine. Philip. Item effect, dimensional storage space of 5 cubic meters. Item cost, express love to it periodically. Finally, a storage-type mysterious object. Chen Lun secretly rejoiced. Days without a backpack were tough, the things he could carry were limited and inconvenient. Now with this little backpack, he could finally carry the stock from the attic and some supernatural items with him, safe and convenient. Your Viscountship, just these 3 items. Chen Lun, holding the 3 selected items, returned to the entrance. It's not that he did not want the other treasures, but he knew when to stop. He had already secured the most valuable items available, and the rest, though precious, were just ordinary items. No need to overly wear out his welcome in exchange for goods. As for the deer head on the wall, it was of no use to Chen Lun, and he also did not want to bear the cost. It could stay here to guard the Pompey family. Mr. Jack, won't you take a bit more? If you're not satisfied, I can take you to an auction to choose some more. Viscount Pompey asked. Chen Lun smiled and waved his hand. This is sufficient, your viscountship. I am very fond of these 3 items, thank you for your generosity. If Mr. Jack is pleased, that's wonderful. Viscount Pompey ordered Binos to close the secret door, his face showing admiration. Mr. Jack really is noble in character, not greedy or arrogant, knows when enough is enough, and understands restraint. Moreover, he is a transcendent from the mystic realm, worthy of deep association. It was clear that Rebecca was fond of him, if only. Forget it, this is not for me to consider. Viscount Pompey reminded himself silently. As he was descending the stairs, Chen Lun suddenly realized that the task Philip's legacy had not been completed. Has it not all been taken yet? That shouldn't be the case, I checked everything in the collection room. He was somewhat puzzled. After a moment of thought, Chen Lun tentatively asked Viscount Pompey. Your Excellency Viscount, may I ask if you know a person named Philip? Viscount Pompey suddenly stopped in his tracks. A look of surprise appeared on his face, and even Binos by his side looked at Chen Lun in astonishment. Mr. Jack, you knew teacher Philip? Viscount Pompey said. I have read his works. Chen Lun maintained a look of admiration on his face, but he felt puzzled inside. Teacher Philip? Hearing Viscount Pompey's reference to Philip and seeing the butler's expression, he suddenly realized something. It appeared that Philip had a deep relationship with the Pompey family. Back in the living room on the ground floor, Binos personally made tea for both of them, and Viscount Pompey, holding his teacup, slowly began relaying the past. It turns out that Philip had once served as the family tutor for Viscount Pompey, and that was more than a decade ago. In his youth, Pompey was uneducated, his father, the previous Viscount, found him a home tutor, who was Philip. Philip was young but learned and was also humorous and witty. The two quickly became friends and he frequently took him to the zoo. Speaking of which, when Mr. Jack was last with us, it reminded me of teacher Philip back in the day. Viscount Pompey smiled, taking a sip of his tea. Back then, he would often use a whip to punish me, of course, without the teacher's discipline, there would be no Pompey of today. I am very grateful to him, as teacher Philip saved an indolent noble youth. He set down his teacup, his face full of emotion. Unfortunately, later the teacher went on a long journey, and I went to join the military, and we lost contact with each other. Chen Lun listened silently, his fingers twitching slightly. It was as if he had traveled back in time, becoming the player who delves into the plot of the story, which made him feel pleased. Later, we moved, and although we left contact information at the old address, we have never received news from the teacher. Viscount Pompey said slowly, his tone low. Chen Lun's heart skipped a beat. Moved. So this place was not the real Pompey Manor. No wonder the task Philip's legacy has not shown completion, because the burial site is not here at all. Chen Lun thought. He organized his thoughts and naturally asked Viscount Pompey for the old address of the manor. Oh, it's in the western part of the inner city district, near Lona Port. Number 4 Wayne Street. Viscount Pompey seemed a bit forgetful, and under the reminder of Binos the butler, he then narrated it clearly. Chen Lun nodded, not continuing on this topic. In his mind, however, he planned to visit this old address to retrieve the Philip's legacy. Just as he was preparing to get up to leave, he suddenly remembered a letter Mrs. Caroline had entrusted to Connie to pass on. Your Excellency Viscount, this is a letter from Mrs. Caroline of number 7 Denton Street in the outer city district, entrusted to me for you. Chen Lun took the letter from his pocket and placed it on the coffee table. And he relayed Mrs. Caroline's words. She said, she doesn't blame you, Henry will always be your best friend. He then bowed and left. At the last moment as he left the great gate, he turned back to see Viscount Pompey taking a medal out of the envelope, holding the letter in his hands, tears streaming down his face. Chapter 83. After leaving Pompey Manor, Chen Lun headed directly to the old site mentioned by the Viscount. On the west side of the inner city district, near the ocean, Lona Port stood. The purple moon reflected on the sea surface where several huge ships were docked, and vaguely, numerous laborers could be seen dragging small boats loaded with cargo. Chen Lun withdrew his gaze and left the terrace at the end of the street. He entered a small alley on the other side and, after numerous turns, arrived at the entrance of a manor. This was number 4, Wan's Street. However, the great gate was locked, and the plaque at the gate had been removed, indicating that no one currently lived there. It was an empty house. Chen Lun looked around and, seeing no one passing by, braced himself against the railing and leaped inside. He did not linger, nor did he enter the villa building, but went directly to the back. According to Philip's diary, the inheritance was buried in the backyard. What is this? Chen Lun stopped in his tracks. He saw tombstones standing in the backyard, separated by carved stone materials, neatly arranged. It turns out to be a cemetery. Chen Lun walked on the little stone path, his eyes scanning over the inscriptions on the tombstones. A few belonged to the Pompey family members, but most were soldiers who had perished in the overseas landing battle. It seemed all were personally inscribed by Viscount Pompey. These soldiers, were the Viscount's comrades? Or subordinates? Chen Lun guessed. Here, he even found the tombstones of Mrs. Caroline's husband, Henry, and their son, Oliver. My benefactor, a dear friend entrusted with my life. This was the epitaph on Henry's tombstone. A beloved child, an excellent son, a brave man. This was the epitaph on Oliver's tombstone. Below the epitaphs of the two men, both had Viscount Pompey's name and date inscribed. Fresh flowers were placed in front of the tombstones, not yet wilted. Chen Lun sighed. He continued walking deeper and discovered a stone spirit temple, its doors securely sealed. Chen Lun's eyes narrowed slightly, and his fingers brushed against the crevice of the door. He then used serpentine senses to flick out his tongue and collect pheromones. Someone has been here, but it wasn't Viscount Pompey, nor Mrs. Caroline. Logically, such spirit temples are generally the resting places for those of high status, and even for worship, the doors would not be easily opened. Chen Lun heightened his alertness and pushed open the door to enter. Vertical pupils do not possess night vision capability, but they can detect heat. At this moment, his vision was pitch black, and he detected no large creatures. With his tongue flickering, he slowly moved to a corner of the spirit temple. A suspicious stone slab showed signs of having been moved. He extended a finger and easily lifted the heavy stone slab, revealing the long staircase below. There's actually a hidden passage here. Chen Lun was surprised. If it weren't for the pheromone traces indicating that someone had entered this place, he might have missed this entrance. Chen Lun put on the sapphire earrings on his right ear and touched the grape ring on his index finger. After checking his gear, he walked down the passage. As he descended, a light appeared ahead, coming from oil lamps lit on the walls. There really is someone. He became more cautious. At the end of the corridor was a bronze gate, carved with various animal and plant patterns. Just as he was about to push the door open, the bronze gate was opened from the inside. Clang! A backlit figure appeared in his line of sight, followed immediately by a hoarse female voice. Hey! Look what I found! A lucky tomb robber! As soon as she finished speaking, the woman extended a large hand towards him. Today is your lucky day, sir, because you're about to move into a free new home right here, in this coffin, haha. Bang! Two palms collided. Hey! The woman's laughter stopped, and she let out a confused sound, stepping back. A transcendent. The next second, the woman attacked again, mist emerging from her body, and faint sounds of waves emanating from within. A straight punch, with a spiral of wind forming around the fist, extinguished the oil lamps nearby. Smack! Smack smack! Chen Lun executed a rhinoceros impact, turning the outer part of his fist to bone, and collided head-on with 3 punches. But he quickly realized that the impact of each punch was dissolved by the opponent's whirlwind and water flow-like movements. The real damage was less than a tenth. A transcendent from the deep-sea faction. Chen Lun thought to himself. The next second, he quickened his attack pace, taking control of the rhythm of the fight. Bear strike, rhinoceros impact, and stork peck were used in succession, becoming more adept. Ping ping pang pang, the sounds echoed in the enclosed underground crypt. The woman grew more and more astonished as they fought, unable to see through the man before her, but she could tell that his strength was not inferior to her own. Lightning! She exclaimed angrily, arcs sparking between her fingers, with blue-white phosphorescence flickering faintly in the mist. But in a blink, she lost sight of the man. Where? Behind you! A calm male voice made her hair stand on end. Thud. Chen Lun struck with a back elbow, the powerful impact hitting the woman directly in the back of the heart. She grunted, tumbling forward. The arc in her palm extinguished, the mist around her dissipating, she got up awkwardly and turned her head to look at Chen Lun. Who exactly are you? The woman asked sternly. Chen Lun glanced at the ornament on the woman's chest, and realization dawned on him. He took a handkerchief out of his pocket and casually draped it over his face, revealing only a pair of emerald vertical pupils. The handkerchief was a gift from Rebecca, but he had never used it before. Now, it was just right for the occasion. One of us. Chen Lun feigned a hoarse, deep voice. He then took out the black skull token he had obtained from Dolly, holding it between his fingers and gave it a shake. In the dark, the woman wore an expression of speechlessness. Your voice is clearly different from before, and this disguise is too amateurish. And that piece of cloth covering your face, how perfunctory it looks, is this supposed to be child's play? However, she didn't want to fuss over these details. According to the rules of the secret society organizer, Black Skull, possession of the token granted one the right to attend the meeting. Come inside, fortunate gentlemen. The woman had no more to say, taking the lead into the inner parts of the crypt. Chen Lun followed closely behind. As his sight shifted from darkness to light, he saw the scene inside clearly. A crude incandescent bulb hung from the low ceiling, barely illuminating the space. Under the dim light was a wooden round table, with 6 people currently seated. They all watched Chen Lun with expressions ranging from indifference to curiosity, calm to inscrutable. He has the society's token, so I let him in. Came the coarse feminine voice beside Chen Lun. He glanced slightly to the side, finally seeing the person he had fought, a woman with pale yellow crew-cut hair, also masked, but with 2 scar lines over her eyelids, deep-set eyes, and a sharp gaze. No problem, since he has the token, he's qualified to join the meeting. A burly figure at the head of the round table spoke. He wore a black skull mask that only revealed his eyes, which looked calm. I am the society's host. You may call me Black Skull, and how should I address you? Chen Lun surveyed the 7 people briefly, then lowered his gaze and in a raspy, deep voice, he said. Spade. Chapter 84. Black Skull hummed thoughtfully and then raised his hand to indicate that Chen Lun could sit down on one of the empty chairs. Chen Lun nodded, casually picked a chair, pulled it out, and sat down. Since we have a newcomer, why don't we all introduce ourselves first? Black Skull leaned back slightly, resting against the back of his chair. The first to echo him was the rough woman who had competed with Chen Lun. You can call me Finn. If there's any towing business, you can find me. The so-called towing is slang, similar in nature to pimping, but more straightforward. This involved directly kidnapping women and delivering them to clients, or kidnapping clients and forcing them to spend money. Chen Lun could smell a hint of the sea and a fishy scent on her, indicating that this woman probably lived around Lona Port, and might even work at the port on a regular basis. Is she Sequence 8 navigator? He silently guessed in his heart. The other 5 individuals then introduced themselves one after another. A short-haired woman wearing a white mask called herself Spirit Cat, and Chen Lun could not feel any supernatural fluctuations from her. The middle-aged man beside her, wearing a skeleton mask inscribed with ancient text, had a robust voice and calm demeanor, and called himself Miser. An elderly-looking man with a hunched back wore a grey hat that covered his face, showing only a few strands of grey beard, and he called himself Knowledge. The other 2 especially caught Chen Lun's attention. A slovenly, bearded man, wearing no disguise, with an indifferent gaze and dressed in a linen robe typical of the lower class, stared straightforwardly as he simply stated 2 words. Iron Hammer. The last one was dressed in a black suit with a white shirt underneath, but oddly had a silver pot upside down on his head. It was unclear how he managed to see clearly. He reluctantly spread his hands, and from the silver pot, a muffled male voice emerged. You can call me gentleman, newcomer. Chen Lun nodded in acknowledgement but did not respond. He was inwardly cautious. The mysterious society hidden in the old site of Pompey Manor had gathered 7 individuals from the mystic realm, 6 of whom, excluding Spirit Cat, were transcendents. And their sequences were not low. At least, Chen Lun had not sensed the presence of any sequence 9. I wonder if Philip's legacy has been taken by them. Chen Lun felt a headache coming on. It seems that our big eater Mr. might mostly have been killed by Mr. Spade. Tisk, when did Amber City have such a strong figure? Gentleman chuckled softly. Spirit Cat glanced at him and countered. It's also possible that he picked up the token. Hee hee. Gentleman shook his head, and the silver pot on his neck swayed slightly. Miser spoke up from the side. That doesn't explain how he found this place. Could it be that Shelter captured Big Eater and exposed our meeting place? Knowledge speculated. Upon hearing the word Shelter, everyone fell silent and a chill fell over them. There's no need to be nervous, everyone. Black Skull spoke softly. Just a shelter alone can't harm us, perhaps Mr. Spade's information was given by Big Eater. Let's not speculate any further, it's pointless. He tapped the table and continued. Let's start today's proceedings, beginning with the trading segment. Chen Lun looked at Black Skull with surprise, wondering why he was giving him an alibi. As the initiator of the secret society, Black Skull seemed to command considerable authority, and upon hearing his words, everyone stopped dwelling on how Chen Lun found the place. 2 portions of low-sequence moon faction mystic substance in exchange for supernatural items, who wants it? Finn took out 2 crumpled bits of paper, brutally unfolded them to reveal 2 black, glossy balls tinged with purple. The group fell silent for a moment until Gentleman finally spoke up. Have you been hunting Moon Church monks again? Be careful, you might get caught one day. Mind your own business, urinal head. Finn scoffed. Gentleman shrugged his shoulders and said no more. I'll take them. Iron Hammer said flatly. What will you exchange for them? Let me clarify, I don't need mystic substance. How about this? Iron Hammer took out a strangely shaped umbrella, whose hooked end actually served as a stock and handle, equipped with a trigger, resembling more a 2-handed flintlock gun. A man-made Class D mysterious object. How does it activate? What's the cost? Finn was intrigued and promptly inquired. Open the umbrella, pull the trigger, and it fires supernatural incendiary bombs, drawing body moisture as ammunition. Iron Hammer was sparing with words, explaining briefly. Good. It's a deal. Finn pushed the 2 black-purple pills forward and reached out for the umbrella flintlock gun. But unexpectedly, Iron Hammer pressed down on the barrel of the gun. What do you mean? Finn furrowed her brow. Not enough. Iron Hammer said, then quickly added. Add another 50 gold pounds. Finn fell silent for a moment, nodded, and grudgingly took out another portion of the low-sequence moon faction mysterious substance. The market price of low-sequence moon faction mysterious substance is around 50 gold pounds, which is reasonable. Black Skull reminded from the side. Iron Hammer didn't respond verbally, just nodded slightly, accepted 3 black-purple pills, and handed the umbrella gun to Finn. Following that, there were 2 more transactions, mostly barter, seldom involving currency. At this stage of their transcendent journey, they rarely lacked money. Rather, their aim was to grow stronger in the mystic realm and progress further along their sequence path. Mr. Spade, do you have any needs to voice? Black Skull asked. Chen Lun noticed that everyone was looking at him and knew he had to do something to avoid suspicion. So, he chuckled lightly, took out a portion of the low-sequence conspiracy faction mysterious substance, a small grey ball. I'm very interested in sequence paths other than the 7 true gods. If anyone has supernatural knowledge, here is a down payment, we can discuss the specifics in private, and you can set the price. Chen Lun did indeed need ascension knowledge, but he couldn't be upfront about it. The hidden sequences outside of the 7 true gods. Destiny, conspiracy, and nature, these 3 sequences are very rare, I don't have them. Black Skull shook his head. After whispering among themselves briefly, everyone else also fell silent. Alright then, if anyone has relevant information, you can also sell it to me. I will pay with a low-sequence mysterious substance. Chen Lun feigned regret and said in a somber voice. Well, if no one else has transactions to make, then let's begin open discussion. Black Skull chaired the meeting. The atmosphere of the society was slightly relaxed and more at ease. I've heard that the recent turmoil in the council is intense. After the assassination of Mr. Daniel, Mr. Lawson is flourishing, as if he's found a powerful backer. The gentleman joked. From what I know, it's a mid-sequence transcendent, very powerful, and he possesses a Class A mysterious object. The miser supplemented. The others were all stunned. Are you sure it's a Class A mysterious object? Finn said in surprise. Such a level of mysterious object, she had not only never seen, but had not even heard of, which was incredibly rare. That's not his property, the miser said indifferently. The others quietly speculated whether this powerful backer of Mr. Lawson had stolen something from a church or robbed some association's foundation. After discussing this topic further, Spirit Cat spoke. Count Bradley is truly a fool. His wife has long had a lover, and he has been kept in the dark. Perhaps he is not unaware, but pretends to be. The scholar coughed twice, chuckling hee. If the Countess's new lover is a powerful transcendent, then Count Bradley would probably not dare to utter a word. That's reality. Others nodded in agreement. Between ordinary people and the mystic realm, there really is a deep chasm. No matter how distinguished your identity or how vast your wealth, before a powerful transcendent, you are just a fragile life that can be extinguished in a snap. Even if there is a warrant from a shelter, one could easily flee to another district. Unless criminal charges are enormous, the Empire would not dispatch excessive forces to pursue. Chen Lun remained silent, reducing his presence while quietly gathering intelligence. Half an hour later, Black Skull stood up to end the meeting. Old rules, everyone leave one by one in order. The next meeting is 3 days from now. If there's any unexpected event, a code will be published in the newspaper to reschedule. Then, he motioned for Chen Lun to lead the way out, leading him to a side door inside the crypt. Entering the side door, Chen Lun found another dozen branching passages that seemed to lead to different exits. He then realized that the old site of Pompey Manor was just one of the entrances. Black Skull escorted Chen Lun to the exit, then nodded and turned back. Chen Lun noticed that on the cuff of his sleeve hung a bell about the size of a fingertip. He memorized this detail. Exiting, Chen Lun found himself back at the drainage ditch in the outer city district, a massive outflow of the drainage canal. Who designed this hideout? Chen Lun marveled inwardly. Hidden and well connected, it truly was the ideal choice for a safe house. Suddenly, a name flashed through his mind. Could it be Philip? The exact words in the diary were, "I've hidden all my savings and collected transcendent items over the years in the underground of Viscount Pompey's backyard. There, I dug a subterranean maze." Chapter 85. The third floor of the small villa, Chen Lun's room. Whoosh. Chen Lun sat at the desk, slowly closing a book. Through careful reading, you have gained 500 experience points. The Flesh Faction Mystic Book Art of Butchery, Progress 100%, has been fully read. You have additionally gained 1 skill point and 1 attribute point. You have discovered complete supernatural pathway knowledge. Flesh Faction Sequence 9 Butcher. The Sequence 9 supernatural knowledge in my hand has reached 5 copies, very good. Chen Lun revealed a satisfied expression. Now that he had half of the 10 sequence pathways in hand, even though he couldn't use the excess ones, it gave him the pleasure of collecting them. After storing the book in the grape ring, he was about to take out a whip for study when he discovered that the ring had suddenly gone on strike, unable to open the dimensional space. The amethyst inlaid on the ring was dull and lusterless, seeming to have lost its strength. Chen Lun was slightly taken aback, then immediately thought of the cost of using it. It needed an expression of affection from time to time. Chen Lun opened his mouth, suddenly feeling somewhat embarrassed. Perhaps someone with objectophilia wouldn't have any psychological barriers. He commented, and immediately said to the ring in his hand. "You are truly beautiful. Just look at that large gemstone of yours, sparkling and shining, look at your curved body, smooth and sleek, ah, how I passionately adore you, moi." After speaking, Chen Lun even smacked a kiss on it. For a long while, the grape ring showed no reaction. Chen Lun pondered. Taking a deep breath, it seemed his way of expressing affection was too greasy. It preferred something lighter and couldn't take it, so he decided to change to a more subtle approach. He took the ring off and held it in his palm. Scouring his mind for declarations of love from literary greats of the past era, he finally settled on Shakespeare. Gazing at the ring, his eyes filled with love, he spoke in a deep voice. "Doubt that the stars are fire, doubt that the sun doth move, doubt truth to be a liar, but never doubt I love." The ring circles the finger, shining brilliantly. Held in hand at this moment, hand to heart. "I love you, like a midsummer night's dream." In the next second, the grape ring burst into a radiant purple glow, seeming to be very pleased. Chen Lun revealed a smile. Outside the door, Floey's hand, about to knock, paused in mid-air. Connie looked on in surprise, covering her mouth with her little hand. "Is Mr. Jack practicing a confession?" Connie wore a curious expression, her cheeks blushing. I wonder who the object could be? Viscount Pompey's daughter, Miss Rebecca? Or... Knock knock. Floey's knock interrupted Connie's murmuring. Excuse me. Floey said softly, then pushed the room door open. Connie was dumbfounded by the scene inside the room, while Floey, holding a tray, trembled slightly. They saw Mr. Jack with his perfect back turned, holding a whip in his hand, raised high as if he was about to lash himself. As he turned his head, there was Floey holding a tray with afternoon tea, her face showing surprise, with Connie covering her little mouth, totally incredulous. If I said I was training, would you believe me? Chen Lun smiled. Mr. Jack, you. Connie stammered her words before turning to flee. Floey regained her composure and placed the plate on the table as if nothing had happened. I made you some afternoon tea with cookies and milk. Then she turned to leave, and when she reached the door, she said softly. I am a blind woman, I cannot see. Chen Lun noticed a slight blush on her cheeks. You're stating the obvious with your eyes covered, aren't you? Chen Lun silently ridiculed her remark, then told himself it was okay, considering it a perk for his people. Cough, could you close the door for me, Floey? I'm going to train. Chen Lun stressed the word train very emphatically. Floey replied with a faint voice of a mosquito, then closed the door and left. Slap. Floey trembled at the sound. Through the door, she heard the sound of whipping and then hurried away. In the room, Chen Lun wore a deadpan expression, mechanically whipping himself. Philip, oh Philip, how I wish you were still alive. I really want to beat you up. Although the whip was somewhat sensational, it greatly assisted Chen Lun. Chen Lun used his enhanced beast tamer exclusive skill, choosing animal mimicry, which was one of his main skills at the moment. The enhancement effect allowed him to release a greater number of attributes simultaneously. After half an hour of flogging, Chen Lun noticed that the effects of the whip were diminishing, so he stopped. Then, he tried to use his skills, and even previously incompatible attributes could be activated at the same time. Compatible serpent attributes reached simultaneous quadruple activation. Whew! The effect is still decent. Chen Lun exhaled a breath of turbid air and wiped off his sweat with a towel. Rustle. His back muscles writhed, and then he shed a complete layer of dead skin. The red marks left by the whip vanished as well, restoring his skin to health and fairness. Molting. Chen Lun seldom used this attribute, as it could heal injuries, but the activation process was too long, making it somewhat redundant in battle. I hope it gets reinforced after the sequence promotion, then I'll have an extra card up my sleeve to save my life. Chen Lun thought hopefully. After finishing off the afternoon tea prepared by Floey, he took a bath and changed into clean clothes. Then he left the house and headed to the western side of the inner city district, Lona Port. His recent expenses were a bit hefty, so he planned to sell a batch of weapons on the black market there to gather some funds. The location of the black market was something he had learned from Binos's butler. As it turned out, the inner city district's black market was hidden in the port. But thinking about it, that made perfect sense. After all, with the constant flow of goods and complex personnel, even with strict management, it was impossible to prevent the emergence of such an underground market. Hey, buddy, let's have a drink after the work is done. Sure thing. Bread clearance. Everything half off before we close at 10. Excuse me, sir, watch out for the carriage. On the spacious arcing walkway of the dock, people bustled about, and numerous carriages with goods or dignified gentlemen and ladies moved slowly along. One side of the walkway was the seaside with boats of various sizes moored, while the other side featured brightly lit shops with dazzling arrays of goods. The noise of the crowd was bustling and lively. Chen Lun walked along the pedestrian path for a distance, then went down some steps on one side, passed through a long, dim alley, and entered a night market. Here, the stalls were neatly arranged in the center, with shops on either side. This is the black market, but I need to find the right intermediary. Chen Lun thought to himself. Suddenly, he caught sight of a familiar face flashing through the crowd. Rebecca. Chapter 86. She was very happy today because her good friend Gabriella had come to visit her at the manor. Gabriella's mother and Lady Pompey were besties, and they often attended the high society salons together. Rebecca and Gabriella had known each other since they were children and attended the same lessons at the Gillyflower Girls' Academy. Rebecca had been missing her friend as well, so after saying goodbye to her parents, she left Pompey Manor with Gabriella to have a look around. "Rebecca, I haven't seen you in almost 2 months." Gabriella wore a high-necked, poofy traveling dress with a long shawl draped over her rough collar, and topped with a coquettish cloche hat. Rebecca's attire was similar, but her gigot sleeves had lace flounces, and her dress was of a more subtly elegant hue. "Is your leg really better? We won't have any trouble walking this far, will we?" Gabriella asked with concern. "It's fine, the doctor has already seen me. As long as I don't engage in strenuous exercise, I'll be all right," Rebecca said. The two walked a fair distance, and without realizing it, they arrived at the docks. Gabriella suddenly whispered secretively. "Rebecca, do you know about the Mystic Realm?" Mystic Realm? Rebecca suddenly remembered the events of the past few days. Her family was kidnapped, left immobile as if turned into statues, and then she witnessed Mr. Jack fighting the enemy. "I heard that there are transcendental powers in this world, like magic tricks. No, they should be called magic. It's amazing, very powerful," Gabriella said excitedly. "The incident at the Emerald Aviary Zoo a while back, that man who caused the riot, was a transcendent with mystic power. He wasn't the one who caused the riot." Rebecca was a bit angry. "Mr. Jack saved us all. He's my knight. He's not a bad person." Gabriella looked at Rebecca with a bit of surprise, wondering why she was so agitated. "Okay." She decided not to continue on the subject and switched to another topic. "Rebecca, I've heard there's a secret market around here, with hidden shops that sell items only found in the Mystic Realm. Should we try to find it? Maybe we can have magic too." After hearing this, Rebecca felt an urge to explore. To be honest, she felt that Mr. Jack was perfect, and she was distancing herself from him. If I had magic, Mr. Jack would surely be shocked, right? Rebecca thought to herself with a snicker. Gabriella gave her a puzzled look, and immediately, Rebecca controlled her expression and resumed normalcy, then said nonchalantly. "Sure, let's go." Gabriella smiled, took Rebecca's hand, and they began searching the streets. It was either by coincidence or destiny that they found a market hidden among the docks, though they did not realize it was the black market. Curious, they started to wander around inside. Chen Lun saw the two of them but did not approach to greet them. He noticed that behind Rebecca, there were several men skulking surreptitiously, peering after them. "Rebecca! Look!" Gabriella excitedly shook Rebecca's hand, pointing to a shop in the corner. The dilapidated sign read Witch's House, but because the light bulbs were old, the word witch was not lit, so from a distance, it was easy to misunderstand. The women exchanged a glance, then immediately entered the shop. A young woman with thick eyeshadow lounged behind the counter, puffing on a pipe. Judging by her demeanor, she was likely the proprietor of the shop. She gracefully removed the pipe from her lips with her long, pale fingers, glanced at them indifferently, and said, "Sorry, we're closed. Please leave." "Ah!" Gabriella uttered in surprise, then saw that there was another middle-aged customer in the shop examining old wares. Pointing at the person, she challenged. "Why is there still a customer if you're closed?" The woman propped her elbow on the table, rested her head on her wrist, and her long hair fell loosely around her in a languid spread. She took a puff from her pipe, smiling lightly. "Because he is a smart customer, and you are not." "What do you mean?" Gabriella frowned. "Professor Molimer!" Rebecca suddenly exclaimed. Turning her head, Gabriella saw Rebecca's surprised expression and followed her gaze to the middle-aged customer. After a brief observation, she realized that the man was actually the history professor from the Golden Broomstick Girls' School. "Oh, it's Rebecca and Gabriella." The middle-aged man turned around and showed a smile. He wore glasses, exuding the aura of a scholar. "What are you doing here at this hour?" "It's not safe at night," Professor Molimer gently advised, shaking his head. As he spoke, he held a clay pot and walked up to the counter, taking out gold pounds to pay. "This is 4 gold pounds, still the usual fake merchandise, Miss Rosa." The woman took the 4 gold coins, asking indifferently. "If you know it's fake, why buy it?" Professor Molimer caressed the patterns on it and said sincerely. "Although the pot is fake, the craftsmanship is real, consistent with the patterns from the old era, and very valuable for research. You see, that's a smart person. They know it's fake, yet they willingly pay for it," Rosa said with a slight smile. Gabriella, seeing her smile, didn't know why, but she felt a sense of inferiority. The other person did not possess a face that could shock the world, yet she radiated an extraordinary charm. Gabriella averted her eyes, not wanting to look at those calm yet compelling eyes. So you mean to say that we're so foolish we can't distinguish fake merchandise and are likely to get deceived? Gabriella said with a tone of dissatisfaction. If you're in business, why bother warning us? Isn't making money good enough? I don't believe there's such a kind-hearted swindler. Gabriella was somewhat annoyed, both for being looked down upon and for realizing there were no genuine Mystic Realm artifacts here, which frustrated her. Because I don't want trouble, young lady, Rosa said as she inverted her pipe, tapping it lightly against the edge of the table to knock out the ashes. There's nothing here that you want. Please leave. Gabriella wanted to say something more, but Rebecca pulled at her. Let it go, let's go, it's late, Rebecca said. But, okay. Gabriella relented, though still upset. Professor Molimer had been standing on the side, and now he intervened. Do you need me to escort you home? No need to trouble yourself, sir, we will escort these young ladies. A flippant voice interrupted. Everyone looked towards the source of the voice and saw 4 or 5 men in black entering the store. They blocked the doorway, surrounding Rebecca and Gabriella. I don't know you. Rebecca said. She was somewhat afraid, regretting wandering so far to such a remote place. Miss, you are being willful again. The boss has instructed us to ensure your safety. It's getting late, let's go back now, one of the men in black said, preparing to drag the 2 women out. Professor Molimer opened his mouth to speak but found himself at the business end of a firearm. The man holding the flintlock gun scoffed and shook the gun barrel in a threatening manner. His accomplices also drew their guns, pointing them at the shop owner, Rosa. However, she remained calm and unhurriedly lit new tobacco with a match, smoking her pipe as if nothing was happening. Suddenly, the leader of the men stiffened, realizing he was floating in the air. The boss told me to take you home too, an unfamiliar male voice came from behind him. A young man with black hair, who had appeared from nowhere, was holding him up effortlessly, like picking up a chick. Back to the home for rejects. Chapter 87. Rebecca exclaimed with joy upon seeing Chen Lun. Chen Lun gave her a smile. Bastard! The guy Chen Lun picked up cursed angrily. The rest of his companions were shocked and pulled out their guns, pointing them at Chen Lun. Bang bang! 2 straight punches, fast as lightning, smashed directly into the faces of 2 men in black. They didn't have time to react, screamed in agony, and fell to the ground with bloodied faces. Chen Lun followed with a high kick that whistled through the air like a black cleaver, kicking 2 other men in black through the air. With 2 clangs, they flew from the entrance of the shop and tumbled down the steps like rolling gourds. This was still Chen Lun holding back, not opting to kill, otherwise, with his strength, these 4 would have long been dead. Sir, is there some misunderstanding here? The guy held in his hand let out a huge scare, sweating profusely. He hadn't expected this unfamiliar young man to be so formidable, downing 4 armed companions with a few punches and kicks. What power are you with? Chen Lun asked softly. These men in black dared to brazenly kidnap a noble lady, probably not a simple matter. The man captured clenched his teeth and remained silent, his face slightly changing. Who else? The dock gang from Lona Port. Woman owner Rosa commented from the side. Chen Lun, like a good citizen disposing of garbage, nonchalantly threw the man in black in his hand. A thud of the heavy body hitting the ground was followed by a moan of pain. Dock gang! Chen Lun muttered and then turned to look at Rosa. The next moment, his pupils dilated and a storm surged in his heart. Is it her? Rosa! How could this woman be here? Chen Lun lowered his gaze, avoiding looking at her to prevent suspicion. The woman before him was no ordinary person, not just in terms of her capabilities but also her identity. She was a Sequence 6 strength holder from the Constellation faction, nicknamed Silver Witch, and the true identity behind the Silver Dragon Trade Association. What was even more unbelievable was that she was not truly a woman. She had once been a man. Until ascending to the Sequence 6 Witch, she had always been a man. This was a characteristic of the Constellation faction. Upon ascending to Sequence 6, an irreversible gender transformation occurred. All male characteristics changed to female, and mentally, the transformation to female thinking was complete, firmly believing oneself to be a woman. Chen Lun knew so much about Rosa because he had once sold many close-up shots of this woman. If one ignored her past gender, her current appearance was indeed beautiful, added with the transcendent of the Constellation faction, naturally skilled in charm. Unaware buyers were still very captivated by her appearance and aura. "What are you thinking about, handsome?" Rosa smiled at him, full of allure. Then her eyes narrowed slightly, and she calmly said, "Do you know me?" "No, I don't." Chen Lun controlled his emotions and lifted his head to reveal a polite smile. "But it's never too late to meet such a beautiful lady." He took off his hat and reached out his hand. "My name is Jack." Seeing this, Rebecca felt somewhat downhearted. "So Mr. Jack likes this type of woman, hey?" Professor Molimer stood by, watching the scene with interest. He had been to this shop many times and had seen other men trying to flirt with Rosa before, but without exception, they were all dismissed in no time. Although this black-haired young man was handsome, Molimer did not think he would succeed. But the next second, Molimer was proved wrong. He raised an eyebrow as Rosa gently reached out her hand to touch Chen Lun's. "Pleased to meet you, Jack," the silver-haired woman owner said, her lips curving slightly as she added. "Rosa. Rosa's affection toward you has increased. It is now neutral." Chen Lun was slightly astonished, he hadn't expected to earn the other's favor without reason. But this was a good thing, as building a connection with such a strong figure had no downside. Rosa withdrew her hand and sized up Chen Lun. "Is this the Mr. Jack that Walsh mentioned, so young?" she thought to herself. However, single-handedly destroying a branch of the Red Apple Church is indeed commendable courage. She was only visiting Amber City on a whim, but in the few months she had been there, the steward at the local branch, Walsh, had specifically briefed her with information about Chen Lun. That piqued Rosa's interest, so she remembered him. "A bunch of useless people. They want me to step in personally." Suddenly, a scolding voice came from outside the store. The crowd turned toward the sound, only to see a muscular woman, with a worn-out backpack, stride in. The moment Chen Lun saw her, he recognized her as a member of the mysterious society, Finn. Her light yellow buzz cut and the scar over her eyelid were too distinctive. Indeed, a couple of pampered young noble ladies. Finn scanned everyone present, and finally her gaze landed on Rebecca and Gabriella, a sneer spreading across her face. "There's a big deal happening recently, and you two came just at the right time." She ignored everyone else and walked straight toward them. If it had been any other place, she wouldn't have dared to abduct people so brazenly, but this was Lona Port's black market, her territory, so she naturally didn't worry too much. The blame lay on these two naive young girls, they'd come to the wrong place. "Whitley, you're reaching too far," Rosa said softly, smoking her pipe. "Don't cause trouble in my store. You can't afford to pay for anything you break." Finn turned her head and glanced at her, frowning slightly. "You know me." She then snorted coldly. "Don't try to bluff me. If you want to keep eating here, mind your own business less. Say another word, and I'll send you to the fish shop to be sold." The fish shop she referred to was the Nightingale Tavern in the harbour area, frequented by dock workers. It was low class but cheap. After saying this, Finn menacingly reached for Rebecca and Gabriella. "Mr. Jack." Rebecca shrank behind Chen Lun in fear, and seeing this, Gabriella also moved closer to his side. Finn sneered, preparing to strike down this bothersome man, but suddenly noticed the deep, meaningful smile on his face. She tensed, sensing that something was amiss. The next moment, a sense of crisis surged. Finn abruptly turned her head, only to see the silver-haired woman gently tap her pipe on the counter. Immediately, there was a faint thud. Thump! Her heart skipped a beat, and a piercing pain erupted. She grunted, blood flowing from her 7 orifices. "You!" Finn's eyes widened, bloodshot, as an unprecedented fear overcame her. Rosa took a puff from her pipe, then gently exhaled. The smoke, shimmering with starlight, drifted toward Finn, then, like a gust of wind, swept her off the ground. "Impossible!" Finn roared in anger, but still could not break free from the control. Her muscular body, like a rag doll, was effortlessly tossed out. Bang! A loud noise came from outside the door. All returned to silence. Chapter 88. Rebecca exclaimed in shock. Next to her, Gabriella also widened her eyes. Both girls had not expected that the owner of the witch's house would actually know how to practice magic. Professor Molimer looked very surprised, but quickly returned to normal, with only a deep look in his eyes that left one wondering what he was thinking. Chen Lun snickered to himself. It was no wonder Finn had kicked an iron plate, as no one would have thought that a mere puddle could conceal a massive shark. This Sequence 8 navigator had encountered a shipwreck. However, Chen Lun could tell that, like himself, Rosa was not keen on killing her opponent. Finn was at worst only injured and made to suffer a bit. Clearly, this powerful figure, who hid away here, did not want to cause too much commotion. Rosa suddenly furrowed her eyebrows. She glanced at everyone and pointed towards the door. "You can go now, my shop is closed." Professor Molimer nodded towards her, tipped his hat, and was the first to leave. Since the other party had issued an eviction notice, Chen Lun did not dare to linger. He left the shop with Rebecca and her friend. Yet before departing, he noticed that Rosa gave him a deep look. Bang! The dilapidated shop door closed tightly, and the hanging lamp went out in turn. Chen Lun had not had the chance to comment on Rosa's swift closing when he realized Professor Molimer had vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, downstairs, Finn and her subordinates were eyeing the market entrance as if facing a great enemy. "Block the exits. Let no one escape," a man in a high-collared trench coat commanded coldly. Dozens of investigators streamed in, took up positions in an orderly fashion, and began controlling the crowd in the marketplace. Some of them also entered the shops on both sides, either questioning or arresting people. The shelter. Chen Lun thought to himself. At that moment, a short-haired woman standing beside the man in the trench coat suddenly turned her gaze towards Chen Lun and his group. Her eyes shimmered with a faint purple light, and her profound gaze seemed like it could see through one's heart. "You are being watched by spirit vision. Your information is being probed." The sapphire earrings on Chen Lun's ears suddenly glowed briefly, and the next second. "Judgment effective, probe immunity granted for this instance." The short-haired woman glanced over the two noble young ladies, Rebecca and Gabriella, and then over the dark-haired young man next to them, without lingering. Her gaze finally settled on Finn. "Deep Sea Faction Sequence 8 Navigator. A special agent of Roderick, there's no doubt it's her," she declared confidently. The man named as Roderick unbuttoned his coat and strode forward, accompanied by 4 investigators wielding repeating flintlock guns. Whitley, codename Finn, Doc Gang leader, rogue transcendent, guilty of violating 23 laws, sentenced to death as per the Sun Codex and containment regulations, he explained calmly as the other 4 investigators raised their guns. "Damn it! The shelter!" Finn roared, and with a blast, mist erupted from her body and her hands were covered in electrical arcs. With a stomp, she shot out like a cannonball, lunging straight at the special agent Roderick. "Quiet!" Roderick said softly, as he lifted his hand and released a black light. In the next second, Finn was frozen in mid-air, her eyes wide open but unable to move. A black wave of light burst forth from Roderick's palm, piercing straight through Finn's chest. Boom! Finn spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards. After tumbling some distance, she bit her lip, struggled to stand, and took out an umbrella from her tattered backpack. Whoosh! She opened the umbrella and pointed it at the people from the shelter, pulling the trigger. Hiss bang! A golf ball-sized flame bullet shot out, tracing an orange arc as it landed amidst the investigators. With a loud explosion, the flame bullet detonated into a sea of fire. The investigators were engulfed in flames, wailing in agony. "Just as effective as I thought." Finn spat out a mouthful of bloody spit and snorted coldly. But before she could relish in triumph, Roderick took out a bottle of black liquid and casually tossed it into the flames. The glass bottle shattered, the black liquid splashed out like ink, dousing the flames instantly. The wounds of the burning investigators healed immediately upon contact with the black substance. Finn's eyes widened in shock. Bang 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 bang! A barrage of gunfire erupted, with flashes of light and bullets pouring down like rain. Finn wanted to escape, but Roderick had anticipated this and aimed his hand glowing with dark light at her. When the soul yearns for slumber, how dare the shell stir? No! Finn stood still, unable to control her body, taking the full brunt of the gunfire. Countless bullets struck her, blossoming into sprays of blood. With a thud, Finn collapsed to the ground. Gasping for air like a dead fish and lying in a pool of blood, the supernatural power of Sequence 8 sustained her, preventing her from dying too easily. The short-haired woman stepped forward, sighing softly. "I've investigated you, Whitley. You come from a poor background, went to sea to support your family, and you're also a fortunate one with exceptional chances. Yet, you shouldn't have abused your powers as a transcendent. In her hand was a revolver, aimed at Finn's head. I'm sorry, I am your executioner, Mona. Bang! Chen Lun stepped forward, blocking Rebecca's view to shield her from the gory scene. Rebecca hid behind Chen Lun, clutching tightly to the corner of his clothes. Gabriella pretended to be brave but found her hand trembling slightly and breaking out in cold sweat. Roderick waved his hand and a black shadow flew out from Finn's body. He captured it into the palm of his hand. Well done, Mona. He praised calmly. But next time, spare the talk. When dealing with scum that endangers the Empire's stability, just kill them outright. Short-haired investigator Mona bowed slightly, without responding. Roderick waved his hand again and his subordinates quickly disposed of the body and collected Finn's umbrella. The black-clad lackeys of the dock gang had also been killed in the chaotic fight, with their bodies dealt with together. Mona raised her head and looked toward Chen Lun and the others. Chen Lun watched Mona approach from a distance. Another familiar character. He thought to himself. The famous official character from the previous world's version 1.0 public test, Mona. She held a high position as a mortal, eventually serving as a special envoy to the shelter. Every wild transcendent and even players who underestimated her were severely chastised by her. It proved the might of a mortal. The law of the mystic realm, only the supernatural can defeat the supernatural, had been broken by Mona countless times. Good evening to the three of you. I am Investigator Mona. I hereby inform you not to spread word of what you've seen tonight, or we will pay you a visit. Also, it's best not to come to places like this in the future. Mona presented her identification. This area is now sealed. The shelter will take over. Please leave immediately. Last, may the moonlight granny watch over you. After she finished speaking and bowed, she turned and left. Chen Lun watched her retreating figure and suddenly felt a familiarity. His thoughts quickly turned to that night when he accidentally intruded on a secret society at the ruins of Pompey Manor. She's Spirit Cat. Chen Lun confirmed in his heart. What was going on today? Encountering so many people from the mystic realm in a single night. The thought crossed his mind, could that leading man also be? Zooming his gaze to the trench coat man leading the group, he took another look at his wrist. A string of bells faintly revealed themselves beneath his sleeve. Black Skull. Chen Lun was startled. The head of the secret society turned out to be a special envoy from the shelter. One of the members, Spirit Cat, was also a spy planted inside. What were they trying to do? An idiom flashed through Chen Lun's mind. Catch them all in one swoop. The shelter was fishing. The special envoy had set a trap, gathering all of Amber City's wild transcendents together, and would eventually strike with thunderous force to suppress them one by one. The capture of Finn today was the best proof. I shouldn't go to society gatherings anymore. It's too dangerous. Anxiety flashed through Chen Lun's emotions. But then he realized something was off about himself. Why am I so afraid? Right, it's the side effect of Maggie's tear when the protection is triggered. He came to an understanding. His emotions had become overly sensitive at that moment. Chapter 89. Under the illumination of the purple moon, Chen Lun called for a rented carriage, intending to take Rebecca and her friend home. In the carriage, Rebecca suddenly felt that Mr. Jack had become somewhat silent and reticent. Mr. Jack, what's the matter? Rebecca asked with concern. Gabriella, sitting beside her, also looked curiously at Chen Lun. Rebecca had quietly introduced him earlier. This handsome young man with black hair was her tutor. If only I had such a handsome tutor. His demeanor when protecting Rebecca was so manly. Gabriella secretly envied. Nothing. Chen Lun gave Rebecca a smile from past days, forcibly suppressing the random thoughts in his mind. The side effects of Maggie's tear were greater than he'd imagined, amplifying every bit of emotion. Even the sight of a stray cat on the street could make him feel mercy, worrying about its destiny. Any slight disturbance would make him think of the recent action at the shelter, putting him on alert. To avoid being overly affected by his emotions, Chen Lun closed his eyes, leaned back in his seat, and tried to empty his mind. Mr. Jack, my birthday is coming up. Will you come to my birthday party? Rebecca said. Her tone was hopeful yet nervous. Seeing Mr. Jack's exhausted appearance, she worried her invitation was too sudden and might displease him, especially since he had been concerned about her earlier. Oh! Miss Rebecca's birthday, is it? Chen Lun slightly opened his eyes, showing tired eyes, then softly replied. Of course, I'll attend. Thank you, Mr. Jack. Rebecca's heart was joyful, and she smiled playfully. Outer City District. A corner of a tavern. Horseman, I really can't stand it anymore. Do you know what it feels like to be dealing with shit and running errands all day long? Doghead Gold finished his drink and slammed the glass down on the table. His face was a mask of agony as he pulled at his own hair. After spending several days traveling from Novice Village to this vast metropolis, he was about to complete a rare sea-level mission, only to be backstabbed by Polaris and So King. In the end, the sea-level mission failed for no apparent reason. When they tried to regain their footing, they were killed instantly by an unfamiliar NPC. All the hard work leveling up in the Novice Village farm was lost. The Iron Fist gang was now occupied by an NPC named Jack, and the three of them were expelled from the gang, rendered jobless vagabonds. Without Mr. Dolly's endorsement, their identity proofs were invalidated, and now they could only do odd jobs in the outer city district to make a living. Although Doghead Gold couldn't find a side mission, he managed to find temporary work at a merchant's home, getting by and unlocking a new sub-occupation. This sub-occupation, though, was a bit humiliating, named Manure Servant. As the name implies, it was a servant specialized in handling one's excrement. My situation isn't much better. Forget No Taboo let out a sigh of despair. Who would have thought, I, the vanguard of the gods' love internal testers, would end up working in a factory. Although I also unlocked a sub-occupation, factory storyteller, telling stories to factory workers every day is torture. The environment was really foul, now thinking about it, ugh. Forget No Taboo seemed to smell the stench of sweat and feet again, heaving with nausea. Seeing his reaction, Doghead Gold also thought of his own plight, resulting in a chain reaction. Yuck. Ugh. Horseman quietly drank his wine, a sweat of speechlessness running down his forehead. He felt fortunate because he had found work in a barbershop, becoming a barber's apprentice. Although it was not very respectable, it was much better compared to these two. However, he had accidentally given a customer a patchy haircut in the past few days and got scolded heavily by his boss, Binos. What should we do next? There isn't much time left for the internal test, and if we don't achieve something soon, it'll really be a total loss. Doghead Gold wiped the corner of his mouth, unwilling to accept the situation. Why don't we go find Polaris and the others? Forget No Taboo hesitated but still made the suggestion. Doghead Gold furrowed his brows, a look of surprise on his face as he looked at him. That could be a way. The horseman thought for a moment. They must have clung to someone powerful. Our previous mission was in opposition to theirs, it seems they were the ones who ultimately won, the horseman said, then called over a server to bring 3 more drinks. He then said in a deep voice. Those who aspire to great things cannot get stuck on trifles. We don't have much of a feud with them, really. As long as we can share a portion of the opportunities, this closed beta will be a success. Forget No Taboo nodded in agreement and said. Yeah, it's okay to humble ourselves now, we're just thinking about the guild. Once the open beta starts, our brothers will remember our good deeds. Only Doghead Gold was not so easily convinced. The script should have been Polaris and So King coming to them for help, so how had it turned around? Doghead Gold, if you're not happy, you can settle it after we've taken off, the horseman advised. They're just 2 individual players. We've got the biggest 3 guilds behind us. In the future, it will be them asking us for favors. Alright. But didn't Polaris delete you from his friends? Slap. Crack. Whipping sounds echoed through Chen Lun's room. Zip crack. Chen Lun raised the whip in his hand and lashed it viciously across his back. The effect of the skill Animal Mimicry of Max has been enhanced. Philip's whip has lost its effect. Phew. Chen Lun stopped his action and tucked the whip into the grape ring. The next second, his expression turned serious as he slowly spread his arms. Swish swish. His body was covered in dark golden scales, as if he was wearing a full suit of golden armor. Under his sweat-drenched black hair were a pair of serpent-like eyes. His muscles writhed, scales rubbing together, giving off a crisp, ringing sound. He raised his hand, opened his palm, his slit-like pupil rotated, focusing on 2 of his fingers, one glowing green, the other glistening with a shiny black lacquer. 5 traits activated simultaneously. In this state, my strength grows yet another notch. I should give this state a name, Chen Lun said as the traits slowly dissipated from his body, a smile spreading across his face. Great serpent form. The whole system was based on the serpentine incarnation as its foundation, adding other traits to create a transformation technique that boosted his overall strength. It allowed Chen Lun to have high-speed movement, strong flexibility, high defense, sharp observation, and a variety of offensive methods. Supernatural toxin was also his forte. Therefore, the name of this state was very fitting, though calling it Python husband form would not be inappropriate either. Chen Lun wiped off his sweat and took a bath. When he returned to the living room on the first floor, he found Floey and Connie discussing something. "Ah, Mr. Jack. The butler from Pompey Manor, Binos, has delivered an invitation. Tomorrow is Miss Rebecca's birthday party, so I'm planning to go out with Miss Floey to buy a dress," Connie said. She had also been wanting to change into a different outfit for daily wear, so she planned to pick out a few while they were out shopping. "I see." Chen Lun remembered Rebecca's invitation from last night, and since it was her birthday, he knew proper etiquette required a gift. He could have Connie bring something back for him. But he soon had another idea. "Connie, after you've returned from shopping, there's something I'd like to ask of you." Chapter 90. Pompey Manor was bustling with activity. Various carriages were parked at the entrance, each adorned with different emblems, some bearing noble family crests, others displaying company logos, and among them was a familiar silver dragon head. Chen Lun stepped down from the carriage, turned back to take Floey and Connie's hands, and helped them alight. All three were in grand attire for the evening. Floey wore a black-purple evening gown, revealing her swan-like slender neck and beautiful collarbones. A matching black-purple tie adorned her head, and her pale golden hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall, creating an overall sense of profound beauty. Connie, on the other hand, was in a light yellow dress, draped with a red paisley fine shawl. Her hair was deliberately coiffed and tied with a plaid tie, giving her a youthful overflow. Neither of them had ever worn such evening dresses before and seemed somewhat uncomfortable. Fortunately, Chen Lun was by their side, and his composed demeanor reassured them considerably. "Good evening, Mr. Jack," and to the two beautiful ladies. Binos stood at the great gate to welcome the guests. "Please come in." He respectfully pressed his hand to his chest and courteously gestured towards the interior. Chen Lun and his group followed the manor's path, slowly walking to the villa. Viscount Pompey and his wife were chatting with a few other guests. Seeing Chen Lun's arrival, the Viscount quickly ended the conversation and came over to Chen Lun. "Mr. Jack, welcome to Rebecca's birthday dinner." "It's my honor," said Chen Lun as he shook hands with the Viscount, and Floey and Connie followed with greetings. Then Viscount Pompey personally led Chen Lun and his companions through the villa's great door. The bystanders were bewildered, wondering what sort of identity the black-haired young man had to receive such treatment from Viscount Pompey. Viscount Pompey led Chen Lun into the lively living room. The long dining table was filled with various high-end dishes. Maids bustled through the crowd, carrying trays of fine wine for the guests to help themselves. The gentlemen engaged in boisterous conversations, laughing loudly, while the ladies gathered aside, either enjoying desserts or whispering among themselves. Whenever something amusing was mentioned, they covered their faces with colorful feathered fans and giggled. "Let me introduce you, this is Councilman Lawson from the Amber City Council, and next to him is his nephew, Mr. Alvin," said Viscount Pompey. Standing before Chen Lun were two gentlemen, one middle-aged and one younger. The Viscount then introduced Chen Lun and his group to the others. "Hello, young scholar," said Councilman Lawson, his voice deep, hair curly brown. He politely shook hands with Chen Lun, then looked past him and said something to the Viscount, smiling and walking towards a man and a woman. "It's Countess Bradley and Mr. Beckman. Mr. Beckman is a gallery owner who has sponsored many talented youths." Viscount Pompey whispered to Chen Lun. "Mr. Jack, I'll go greet them first, please wait a moment." Chen Lun nodded in understanding. Following the Viscount's gaze, he saw a richly dressed lady, leaning intimately against the man next to her. The gentleman sported a mustache and was dressed in an immaculate white suit, topped with a white straw hat. Chen Lun recalled the information he'd heard that night at the Secretive Society. The Countess and her lover. "Are you Miss Rebecca's home tutor?" The young man named Alvin spoke up, drawing Chen Lun's attention back. "Yes, Mr. Alvin." Chen Lun smiled politely. Alvin lightly smiled, casually took a glass of wine from a passing maid, took a sip, and smacked his lips. "How can a home tutor attend such a gathering? No offense, but you're not quite up to par." He shrugged innocently. It might hurt to hear this, but it's the truth. And this lady next to you seems like she's never been in such a setting before, like a country girl. Stay tuned with Empire. Alvin was referring to Connie. Hearing his words, Connie clenched the hem of her dress tightly, her face showing an expression of embarrassment. She felt upset but couldn't rebuke him. He soon felt a sense of inferiority rising within his heart. However, this lady is rather special. Alvin extended his hand toward Floey, revealing a gentleman's smile. May I have your name, miss? Perhaps we can dance a waltz later at the ball. That's very rude of you, Mr. Alvin. Chen Lun said. Alvin glanced at him, unmoved, waiting for Floey to take off her gloves so he could kiss the back of her hand. He believed that, given his status, she would not refuse him face. Coming across such a beautiful girl made Alvin's heart flutter. I'm sorry, sir, but you stink. Floey's ethereal voice said. Alvin's expression froze, his mouth slightly agape. You said, what? Stink? He raised his hand to sniff himself but could only smell the perfume he had sprayed before leaving the house. Connie snorted with laughter. Alvin immediately turned cold, realizing he had been played. You. Mr. Alvin, I hope you can apologize to Connie. Chen Lun said with a smile. Just as Alvin was about to scoff, he saw the chilly expression on the young man's face, and it turned extraordinarily indifferent. Those eyes looked at him as if he were a dead man, making him very uncomfortable. Apologize. A cold voice entered his ears, and a faint glimmer flashed by. Boom. Before Alvin's eyes, the entire banquet hall disappeared, replaced by a boundless sea of blood. He was standing alone on its surface. Suddenly, a golden python emerged from the horizon, drenched in blood. He shivered in horror, watching the sky-obscuring giant python open its massive jaws toward him. Boom. Alvin felt his body being torn apart, extreme pain assaulting his nerves, only his head sank into the seabed. His vision turned blood red. His mouth and nose filled with thick blood plasma, unbearably foul, until he choked. Ha! Alvin suddenly snapped back to reality, gasping like a fish out of water, his face pale and covered in sweat. The black-haired young man in front of him had regained his polite smile, as if everything that had just happened was a hallucination. What's wrong, Mr. Alvin? The other party reached out solicitously, wanting to help him up. Alvin shuddered as if electrified, stepping back several paces. He stumbled and accidentally fell to the ground. The wine glass he held was not secure, and the wine spilled over him. Don't come near. I'm sorry, miss, I was rude. Alvin felt an extreme fear in his heart, not daring to look directly at the black-haired young man. He bowed in apology and then scrambled to his feet to leave. Thank you, Mr. Jack. Connie seemed to understand something and said to Chen Lun. She showed a grateful look, enjoying the feeling of being protected by Mr. Jack. Don't feel inferior about this, Connie, you will become the most dazzling creator one day. Chen Lun whispered softly. These nobles aren't even qualified to carry your shoes. Connie nodded moved, agreeing softly. Floey smiled slightly, remaining silent about it.